We are going to call this meeting of the TRPA Governing Board to order. It is Wednesday, January 28th, and it is 10:34. The first item on the agenda is roll call to determine quorum. Tracy, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Oldine?
Here.
Ms. Bennett?
Here.
Mr. Bass?
Here.
Ms. Conrad Seda?
Here.
Ms. Faustinos?
Here.
Ms. Gustafson?
Here.
Ms. Hill?
Here.
Ms. Lane?
Here.
Ms. Loomer?
Here.
Mr. Rice?
Here.
Mr. Settlemeyer? Ms. Williamson?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Just a quick reminder to remote committee members, please don't use the chat box to have any sidebar conversations, and please raise your hand or just shout at me if you need to get a hold of me for comments. I'll make sure though to ask if people have comments online after we do that in the room for governing board comments. Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all stand, please. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. Next up, agenda item 3 is the public comment period for items on the agenda. Any member of the public wishing to address the governing board on any agenda item, including the consent calendar, can do so at this time. Please either click the raise hand icon on the Zoom screen or dial *9 on your phone to be called upon if you're remote. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker and will start in the room. Are there any members of the public wishing to make comment at this time?
Good morning, Allie Waller. Happy New Year, first meeting of the year. I'm here to talk about the housing strategies. My written comment about this issue, Tahoe Vista and Kings Beach have had recent purchases of smaller, older motels converted to employee housing, I think. What categories do these conversions fall in? There needs to be accountability. How is this documented? Are these units converted and or deed restricted? And of course, VMT. The intent today, I believe, is to create new units, not deed restricted existing units, as was allowed for the Beach Club in Douglas County. This needs to be prohibited. Donations of land also do not really get units built. In lieu fees pool captured to date need to be disclosed. How much is available? Has any units been built with any of those in lieu fees? I agree with the Sierra Club comment. The phase 3 policy package is overwhelmingly biased toward more development, more density, more height, more units, while failing to address existing conditions that already exceed the basin's capacity. I also agree with the mountain area preservation comment, as the focus of the phase 3 process is to advance housing in those in need, i.e. workforce, low-income seniors, and disabled communities in Lake Tahoe Basin while maintaining the growth cap. I agree with the Friends of West Shore. The current proposed policy document is heavily skewed in favor of more development. I agree with the North Tahoe Preservation Alliance comment. Absence of real growth cap, growth management system, structural metrics, units, land coverage allocations. Accountability of the conversions of units of use are at the forefront of ascertaining growth management and proposed purported growth cap. It is necessary to have each local jurisdiction agree to TRPA's accounting of the units is correct and should be documented in this environmental impact study. It has to start somewhere. The local jurisdictions need to agree with TRPA's accounting, and that should be put in writing. The conclusion is, without a fixed ceiling that cannot be exceeded, the cap is not a cap, and units of use must be verified. Trust, but verify. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to make public comments in the room?
Good morning, honorable members of the TRPA Governing Board. My name is Zach Thomas. I'm the Director of Development Services for the City of South Lake Tahoe. The City of South Lake Tahoe appreciates the opportunity to provide comments on the notice of preparation and to analyze the cultivating communities conserving the basin policy recommendations. The City of South Lake Tahoe staff has been engaged in the Tahoe Living Working Group since its inception to advocate for equitable development in our community. While the previous phases of the Tahoe Living have been important progress, the addition of the market rate multifamily housing is essential to addressing the full spectrum of housing needs and address this in the region's housing crisis. Our workforce, from teachers to healthcare workers to hospitality employees and first responders, desperately need a range of housing options at various price points. Market rate multifamily housing will help fill this critical gap in our housing continuum and provide much needed options for middle income residents who currently face a really limited housing choice in the basin. The City of South Lake Tahoe has consistently demonstrated regional leadership in advocating for housing solutions through comprehensive programs, forward-thinking policies, and actual project development. Our community has implemented innovative approaches, which include permit streamlining, inclusionary housing ordinances, reduced parking requirements, active pursuit of state and federal funding to build housing, development of deed-restricted housing. 678 deed-restricted affordable housing units exist within the city. 192 are currently under development as we speak. And providing, city has also provided development rights for multifamily rental property for free and has cultivated public and private partnerships to accelerate housing. The city is currently undertaking more housing development projects than any other jurisdiction in the basin, with multiple projects in various stages of planning, permitting, and construction. This commitment extends beyond policy. We're putting shovels in the ground and creating housing opportunities. However, the city cannot solve this regional challenge alone. This housing shortage affects every community around the lake, and it requires a coordinated basin-wide action. This is what we're seeing here today. The Tahoe Living Phase 3 amendments represent an important opportunity for the TRPA to provide the regulatory framework necessary to enable all basin jurisdictions to meaningfully participate in addressing shared housing needs. By only addressing deed-restricted housing, we are failing to truly address the housing crisis. This is why we need the support for the market rate multifamily units. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room?
Good morning, members of the TRPA Governing Board and staff. My name is Jessica Wackenhut Lomeli, and I'm the housing manager with the City of South Lake Tahoe. Thank you for the opportunity to comment here today. The position that only deed-restricted housing should be allowed is fundamentally exclusionary and fails to address the full scope of our housing crisis. Our teachers, nurses, firefighters, small business owners, and other middle-income workers cannot afford single-family market rate housing, yet they often do not qualify for deed-restricted affordable units. The missing middle represents a significant portion of our workforce that is being forced out of the basin entirely. Market rate multifamily housing is not in opposition to environmental protection. It is essential to creating complete, sustainable communities. In addition, state and federal financing sources support 80% and below of the area median income. There are currently no available financing sources to support the income levels that are between 80% and 180% of the area median income. The incentives proposed in the scope to support market rate multifamily housing development would benefit these community members with quality housing that meets their income levels and that are not currently subsidized by any source. Opposing height and density increases actually works against environmental goals. Low density development patterns force sprawl, increase vehicle miles traveled, expand impervious surfaces across a wider area or coverage, and make public transportation infeasible. Concentrating housing in appropriate town centers and mixed-use areas through increased height and density is precisely what smart growth and environmental planning principles recommend. Higher density development in already developed urban areas reduces pressure on the sensitive lands and natural areas that we have. Allowing density actually supports evacuation during severe events such as wildfire evacuation, as people are in one location that is not sprawled. This is also supported by the California Attorney General's office. The false choice between housing and environmental protection does not serve our communities or the lake. It also does not advocate for the community members who have already been displaced from our communities around the Tahoe Basin. The current housing shortage itself creates environmental harm. Workers commuting from Carson Valley, Reno, and Truckee generate far more vehicle emissions and traffic impacts than residents living in well-designed multifamily housing near their workplaces. The lack of workforce housing perpetuates car-dependent commuting patterns that directly harm air quality and contribute to traffic congestion on sensitive mountain roads. In South Lake Tahoe, the majority of the city is within half a mile of transit, and transit only works when you have higher density within that half mile. The town centers are not meeting this density standard currently. The city is supporting the analysis of all options, even the worst scenarios, to ensure that we know about everything with the most knowledge possible and education and the facts. And with that, we know what cannot be mitigated as well. Our community has been vocal about the housing needs in the city, including the ability to streamline and incentivize more market rate multifamily housing. And when other jurisdictions will also continue to contribute more affordable and multifamily housing units.
And we're at the 3 minutes. I really appreciate your comments, but in an effort to be fair to everyone, do you want to just wrap it up quickly?
Yep.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem. Thank you. Based on all the things our staff has learned to support the development our community advocates for, we believe that the options provided will support our surrounding jurisdiction to enhance housing choice, affordability, and opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to make comment? And if more people in the room wish to make comment, please just be ready to jump up next. Thank you.
Good morning, TRPA Governing Board members. Alexis Aller, Executive Director of Mountain Area Preservation. Thank you so much for taking our comments into consideration, as well as providing us the opportunity to serve on the Tahoe Living Working Group. Our Advocacy Director has been serving in that effort. I've been stepping in while she's on maternity leave, but we did submit a comment letter. We've been submitting comment letters and working with your staff on the phase 3 process. I just want to acknowledge gratitude that the policy that was focused on market rate housing was removed, as that was really counter to this process. And I want to say that because this funding and this planning was really focused on advancing housing for those in need in Tahoe, seniors, disabled communities, low income, our workforce. And your own survey results really illustrate that. 2/3 of Tahoe residents are struggling with affordability, and they're using 50 to 80% of their income on housing. I think that really says what we're here doing is we're here to advance the housing for those that are in need, and frankly, those who don't have a voice in the planning process. And I think that's really key, because the funding that TRPA was afforded was amazing funding to help with the analysis and the policies to drive the type of housing that Tahoe needs and the type of housing that protects the lake. So I want to really reiterate that. And I appreciate the planning staff from the city of South Lake. South Lake is the community with the most deed restricted housing. North Lake doesn't even have 100 units of deed restricted housing. And so I may probably be a little bit more focused on some of those comments, because I'm from the North Lake community. I lived in that community for a very long time. We had Domus as the one project that came to the North Lake community, and that was a long time ago for all of you in the room that were part of that process. Some of you were. And so I think it's just important to recognize that deed restricted units are what preserve the housing stock for our workforce. Without a deed restriction, it's open to the market. And we all know what that creates in Tahoe. We have a lot of luxury housing, a lot of market rate housing. We have no problem driving that in our community. What we do have a problem with is creating deed restricted housing to serve those in need. So as you're starting the notice of preparation and the environmental impact statement kickoff, which will happen soon, how exciting for us land use people. keep that in mind. This is the process to drive the housing for those in need, and the market's going to bear just fine in Tahoe. We all know that. So I just want to appreciate the staff's time and working with MAP, and also allowing us the space to serve on the Tahoe Living Working Group and advocate for the housing Tahoe needs for the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. Oh, excuse me. Gavin Feiger, Policy Director, League to Save Lake Tahoe. It's known as Keep Tahoe Blue. First off, thanks to staff and board members and the Tahoe Living Working Group members who have been in this. We've been involved for the last 5 years since the beginning. And everybody's taken part in it for the same reason. Everybody's trying to figure out how to get workforce housing for Tahoe. Regardless of definition, income cap, what we're looking for is workforce housing for Tahoe. We're Keep Tahoe Blue, we're specifically involved to make sure the environment does not suffer. We support going forward with the EIS as proposed today, largely because the incentives for market rate were taken out. We actually very much appreciate the achievable category that provides workforce housing for our teachers, firefighters, everybody you list permanently, or at least long-term at a more reasonable price range, where market rate, no control over who lives in there, how much you charge for it. With the EIS process kicking off, it's a really good time to remember why TRPA, why you all have these rules and regulations like coverage and development rights. And it's to protect the environment. They're based in science, and they're part of why Tahoe's environment is so nice. Despite our challenges, it's great here. Science, of course, does change over time. So, the EIS must and will be based in best available science. We'll be along for that ride and making sure along with you that happens. So today I'm just going to highlight a few key points from our letter and one that wasn't in there. Our biggest concern or place we need to work is coverage, water quality, and lake clarity. Lake clarity is still very fragile, as we're hearing through the threshold updates. Relaxing coverage rules without a clear enforceable alternative just isn't justified. And we're still far from our clarity targets, compact mandated threshold. So any changes today must improve water quality, not put our environmental thresholds at risk. The parcel level administrative fee for BMPs, really good idea. Love to see that moving forward. A few other ideas in there too that I think will come out well in the EIS. Limiting parking, as we've said through all the phases and any opportunity we get, will also help. We don't want to have coverage for parking. Coverage can go to people. We consistently advocate for lower parking minimums. We'd actually prefer to see maximums. Some people, not all, but some people don't have a car and don't want a car. And developers know that. They'll build to what the market demands. So they can choose to provide a couple spots. They can provide 0, but giving them the flexibility to provide less also really helps with coverage. Development rights, the short-term rental pools, I really appreciate seeing the TRPA pools will not go into short-term rentals, but that should be expanded to all conversions. Otherwise, it has the chance of undermining all the good efforts. And then finally, strong and consistent enforcement, including these restrictions, is essential. So just encourage you to focus on only pushing forward the incentives that are going to remain focused on deed restricted housing. That includes STR and available, not just achievable and affordable. And then you have to have safeguards that are clear, enforceable, and achievable, and accountability built in. So thank you for the time. I think you're heading in the right direction.
Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else in the room? Okay, let's go online then, please, Catherine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 8 hands up online so far. First hand raised was Aaron V. Aaron, if you could give us your full name and unmute to make your comment.
Yeah, my name's Aaron Vanderpool. Good morning. I have spent my whole life. Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, I've spent my whole life growing up here at Lake Tahoe, so I've experienced affordability problem. I also want to repeat that North Lake Tahoe is very different from South Lake Tahoe, and that's where maybe a lot of disagreements might be, but I think they should be treated differently and at least acknowledge that they're different. I signed in today to comment on the EIS, and in the preparation materials it specifically mentions housing choice. The housing things is really important to me and of concern because my income goes up, but of course my costs go up even more. And I feel certain that the housing amendments are going to make these things worse through these phases. During the Cultivating Community workshops, TRPA pointed out that the regular single-family homes have been on the serious decline. And what I'm specifically asking you today is to investigate how accessory dwelling units, otherwise known as ADUs, are going to negatively impact affordability for buyers. If existing family homes are allowed to build ADUs, then that limited supply of single-family homes shrinks even more, and those are no longer affordable single-family homes that people can, a single family can afford. The affordability gets worse because of ADUs on that parcel. Also, if ADUs increase taxes on that property, then those costs will just be passed on to renters anyways. The housing amendments are focused on the lowest income and on rentals to meet a hypothetical cap. That cap should be reevaluated anyways with their carrying capacity. I don't see how the amendments fix the problem of growing wealth inequality or a healthy housing mix. They just exacerbate it into the future, and I think there's going to be a worse situation. The amendments that allow ADUs and more rentals just increase wealth inequality. A society with a big wealth cap is not healthy, of course, and we know that from many studies. I want a balanced mix of housing that lets all income brackets live and not a huge wealth gap that erodes the working class like we continue to see. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll skip. I think it's worth repeating, though, that month after month, I see existing houses and new homes get larger and larger, more like ADUs, more additions, more custom fancy homes, especially here on the North Shore. We have limited parcels in the basin, and we're losing those affordable housings and those entry-level houses that a normal working class can afford and that I dream of getting someday. And I don't think it's impossible anymore. TRPA has the ability to put limits on housing sizes and coverage and stop ADUs, and you can limit coverage to stop the upper class from taking all those parcels from the working class like myself. And myself and my coworkers are living in crummier and smaller condos and rentals. And to that point, I do not approve of the high density urban town centers because we just get stuck in crummier places while the luxury housing developments get larger and larger. And
Thank
I
you,
have
sir.
a little bit more, but thank you.
Thank you.
Next hand raise is Jean Diaz. Jean, please unmute to make your comment.
Good morning, board and staff. Gene Diaz, Executive Director for St. Joseph Community Land Trust. We've been a member of the Tahoe Living Working Group for several years now and appreciate the opportunity. We support TRPA staff's recommendation to proceed with the notice of preparation to prepare the environmental impact statement. This will be the next important step in the evaluation of the recommended policy changes that represent the need to streamline approvals for and provide enhanced resources to support low and moderate income housing for the basin's workforce and residents while considering the environmental conservation mission of TRPA. The adequate provision of affordable housing, especially for the basin's low and moderate income workforce in the basin, will yield positive environmental results for the basin through reduced VMTs, for example. Thank you for your consideration of the extensive staff and community work that has gone into the report and recommendations. Thank you.
The next hand raised is Sarah Schmidt. Sarah, please unmute to make your comment.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Governing Board. My name is Sarah Schmidt. I'm the Executive Director of the Tahoe Prosperity Center. I'm here to express support for releasing the notice of preparation for the cultivating community, conserving the basin policy recommendations, and for moving this proposal into the environmental analysis phase. In fall of 2024, the Tahoe Prosperity Center conducted a region-wide basin walks, engaging more than 360 businesses across the basin. One message came through clearly and consistently: housing affordability is one of the most significant constraints on workforce stability and business viability in Tahoe. Housing affordability was the most common reason businesses cited that they said they lack the staff or resources they need to thrive, and 37% identified employee housing as a key resource needed to grow or maintain their business. Businesses also raised regulatory complexity and permitting challenges as a barrier that affect their ability to operate and plan for the future. Importantly, these concerns are not coming from a desire to weaken environmental protection. Nearly 70% of businesses told us that sustainability and environmental stewardship are very important to the success of Tahoe's economy. From the perspective of local employers, housing workforce stability, and environmental protection are deeply interconnected outcomes. From the Tahoe Prosperity Center perspective, the Cultivating Community Conserving the Basin initiative represents an important next step on building on this work. Moving the proposal into the EIS phase allows for a transparent, data-driven evaluation of policy options. We appreciate TRPA's recognition that housing affordability and environmental protection are not competing priorities, but are interconnected challenges that require coordinated solutions. Thank you for the leadership on this issue, and we respectfully encourage the governing board to approve item 7 and continue moving the Cultivating Community Conserving the Basin proposal forward. Thank you for the opportunity to comment this morning.
The next hand raised is Rob Olson. Rob, please unmute to make your comment.
Hello, everybody. This is Rob Olson. I'm on the Tahoe Living Working Group, and pretty excited about today because hopefully we can be moving forward with the notice of preparation for item 7A. I think there's a lot of good work that's happened to date on trying to help move the needle on workforce housing. And this is just another big step that can get us closer to seeing some meaningful change in the codes and procedures that are governing the area that kind of restricts workforce housing. It's pretty clear to me, and I think others, that having a local workforce that lives and is part of the community in the basin is immensely valuable, not only to the sense of community, but also to the environment. Having people be able to walk to work or take public transportation or a bike is good. It's a good thing. Having developers or property owners think about building workforce housing instead of market rate housing is a good thing. This is all good stuff today, and we really need to be moving forward. So I could not be in more support of the next steps that we're going to be getting into, and encourage us to just go, go, go. So thank you for your consideration. Please approve to move forward. Thank you.
The next hand raised is Nick Spiel. Nick, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi, my name is Nick Spiel. I'm also commenting on item 7A regarding the Cultivating Community Conserving the Basin project. I've attended many of the public outreach meetings held on the South Shore and wanted to thank staff for conducting such extensive outreach throughout this process. It's really set an example that I'd like to see other agencies in the region model off of in terms of how to conduct broad engagement on a complex set of topics. One consequence of such broad consensus building, however, is bold ideas can tend to get watered down. I'd like to encourage this board to move forward with the EIS, giving the ideas proposed here a chance at a fair scientific analysis to understand their impact, both in terms of access to affordable housing and protecting Lake Tahoe's environment. The memo in the staff report forecasts some of the impacts that the proposed changes here could have on incentivizing workforce housing development. And unfortunately, by this point in the process, the changes still seem worthwhile, but the wins are quite modest. The memo notes that 2 ADUs have been built per year lake-wide since 2018. It predicts that these incentives will increase ADU development by 300%. So maybe we can look forward to 6 ADUs per year when this is all said and done. The memo also notes that demand across California to convert single-family houses into missing middle housing like duplexes, but it estimates that the amendments to allow this could lead to 5 additional conversions per year across all of Lake Tahoe. These are not big numbers. It's the right direction, but when compared against the scale of the housing crisis in Lake Tahoe, we need to be considering bolder actions to ensure that the people who work in Lake Tahoe can afford to live here and not have to spend their days commuting in and out of the basin. The big elephant in the room when it comes to housing policy continues to be vacation home rentals. By continuing to use the growth management system to limit the number of housing units with RUUs and limit the number of hotel units with TAUs, but declining to use any TRPA authority to impose any limits on the number of vacation home rentals, locals will continue to be outbid and lose their homes to vacation home rentals on the open market. This would be a sensible time to close the loophole and apply the TAUs to vacation home rentals, and at least worth studying in the EIS. It was originally considered, but is now removed from the proposal list. At a high level, this project is moving in the right direction, but I would caution you against watering it down and to move forward with bold strategies to tackle the housing crisis head on. Thank you.
The next hand raised online, the Zoom name is just the letter Q. Q, if you could unmute, state your full name for the record and make your comment. Q, if you can unmute on your end. Okay, we'll circle back. The next hand raised is Emily Setzer. Emily, please unmute to make your comment.
Good morning. I'm Emily Setzer, Principal Planner at Placer County and Vice Chair of the Tahoe Living Working Group. We support this environmental review of the cultivating community proposals and thank staff and their consultant team for their hard work. We support tiered incentives to incentivize multifamily housing and disincentivize more large single-family houses that aren't utilized as full-time homes. In North Tahoe, we have had decent interest in building multifamily and ADUs, but we've seen very little development. To see ADUs built, which can provide excellent incremental housing, we recommend removing the requirements for residential units of use or bonus unit requirements. We also support incentives for non-restricted multifamily rental housing. The few apartments that have been built in North Lake in the last couple of decades that are not deed restricted are overwhelmingly housing local workers anyways. Placer is already incentivizing deed-restricted multifamily construction through its Launchpad program, but that may not be desirable for all developers. For rentals, we need it all, whether it is deed-restricted or not. Please let the local jurisdictions make those determinations. We also want to remind the governing board that Placer does not have enough active stormwater treatment systems to allow the increased coverage for multifamily projects that was included in the Phase 2 housing amendments. We hope the cultivating community process will analyze additional innovative coverage solutions that would allow multifamily projects to achieve the increased density needed to make those projects financially feasible. We really need these additional code and process changes to be able to house more of our local workforce and residents and prevent more people from commuting from outside of the region. I thank you deeply for the opportunity to provide input and the ongoing work that is ahead of you. Thank you very much.
The next hand raised is a phone-in caller. The phone number ends in 8525. You're unmuted on my end, and you need to unmute yourself by dialing *6 to make your comment.
Hi, my name's Leo Bennett Cochon. First time I'm attending. Great meeting. I'd like to share the experience that my wife and I had in terms of workforce housing. Perhaps it could give you some ideas. My wife and I met in an intentional community which shared housing with folks with no income. When we became teachers, we had, of course, trouble finding housing, and the community that we were in had seasonal visitors. So, they would come and then they would leave, and the places they would go to had additional spaces for workforce people like us that weren't seasonal. So we purchased an RV and we could park it there. And then later we were able to purchase one of their park models. And it was all teachers and firefighters and everybody else in the off season, because we all would congregate at the various community facilities that were supported by the rich folks that came during the various tourist influx. And then gradually we climbed up and were able to buy our own homes. And it was just always so grateful that there was that particular option available. Thank you for letting me share my story.
The next hand raised is Amelia Richmond. Amelia, please unmute to make your comment.
Hey, for the record, my name is Amelia Richmond, speaking in support of agenda item 7A. I want to thank TRPA staff working group members, consultants, and regional governments for all their work on this policy packet and their public outreach. It's a remarkable body of work, and I truly appreciate the time and thoughtful effort that has gone into it. As a Tahoe homeowner and resident of the last 15 years, I want to voice my support for affordable by design market rate housing, which is desperately needed to help improve our community's housing costs, lake clarity, and create the vibrant, walkable communities that mutually help residents, improve our environment, and help local tourism to thrive. I hope the EIS will study the impact on lake clarity of having more than 50% of our workforce commuting around the lake and weigh it against the costs and benefits of coverage. One component that I'm hoping will be included in the scoping is reviewing the option to build detached condos. The TRPA's December housing needs survey showed 88% of local survey participants preferred to live in a residence that is a single family home, cabin, or detached unit, with the top two requests being for a home that is more affordable and a home with adequate storage space and/or a garage. Small standalone starter homes allow families to build equity and slowly invest to expand their home incrementally as their family grows, growing the home and their equity in it. But the high cost of land is one of the major factors currently pricing residents out of homeownership. So instead of being limited only to attached condos, allowing detached condos would allow for the possibility to build multiple small detached homes on a single lot to allow for more of the housing that residents want, while maintaining neighborhood character and without subdividing land, in keeping with TRPA's bylaws. The same goes for allowing ADUs to be sold as condos to provide more pathways to home ownership for residents. I hope you will move forward with the EIS as prepared, and I encourage staff and researchers to consider detached condos within the scope once the research begins. Thank you.
We have two more hands raised. The next hand raised is Elizabeth Ballman. Elizabeth, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. Elizabeth Ballman with Sierra Community House and the Cultivating Community Working Group. I echo the comments in favor of increasing affordable housing in our communities. We see more and more with our workforce housing rental assistance programs, increased demand in rental assistance with community members falling further and further behind. We also see an essential component of our workforce housing, affordable housing landscape, mobile homes, more and more us losing that element of affordable housing. Just this week, we hear of a new mobile home park yet another mobile home park in Kings Beach that will be closed soon. And that layer of affordable housing, which we see has provided stable housing for members of the workforce, cooks, HOA maintenance workers, Safeway workers, all being forced out of longstanding affordable housing. And we're concerned about more and more need replacing that element. Thank you.
And the last hand raised, we're back to Zoom user letter Q. Again, if you can unmute and state your full name for the record and make your comment.
Board of Directors who had TRPA Director Julie Reagan is not only a grifter and a con artist, but is a despicable, corrupt, pathological liar. She is a mirror reflection of the TRPA Board of Directors who had the effrontery to hire her in the first place. Under her helm, TRPA is currently implementing a new authoritarian practice of outright violating constitutionally protected due process and First Amendment rights. TRPA is knowingly and purposefully suppressing and obstructing both timely hard-mailed and emailed public comment from being entered into the meeting record and being disseminated to all board members. The case law is crystal clear that such constitutional violations alone are incontrovertibly grounds for judicial review to outright invalidate governing board decisions on any agenda item pertinent to censored public comments. For example, I can produce incontrovertible video proof from a trusted source that TRPA confirmed it had received via public comment of thousands of pages of peer-reviewed research before yesterday's Tuesday 4 p.m. courtesy deadline, many of which are published by prominent professors at preeminent institutions in prestigious journals, and all of this was suppressed in order to unlawfully affect the outcome of today's hearings. This large body of research directly controverts tenuous science claims underpinning political-driven policy being considered by the governing board today. TRPA. Board members have knowingly approved unconstitutional rules of procedure that strategically deprive the public of their inviolable due process right for a right to be heard pertaining to each and every agenda item at a meaningful time. The contours of constitutional due process of law are well settled under 250 years of precedent. TRPA has corruptly lumped public comment for all agenda items together into a 3-minute window at the beginning of the meeting before any testimony is made on any of the agenda item whatsoever. Hearing materials, including presentation slides, are introduced right before meetings. And public is entirely unable to discover arguments and alleged factual bases presented for the first time during the hearing held after public comment. Moreover, when an individual has a liberty interest in 3 or more agenda items, their comment time is divided between all of these items unfairly and unreasonably, leaving them with less than a minute for each item. This is an egregious violation of constitutional law. Not only should each and every one of you be civilly liable for your constitutional violations, but your corrupt asses should be voted out of office. You are all morally bankrupt. Every last one of you. You don't care about anything other than power and money. That's why you wanted office, and that's the true reason you're here today. The public at this point needs to realize that this entire board meeting is a charade. The agency itself is little more than a thinly veiled banana republic. It acts as though it reigns over a very small sovereign territory that is politically unstable and whose economy is dominated by very large foreign or external companies and depends on one exploitive industry such as tourism. And apparently has a corrupt, dictatorial.
Great, we're at 3 minutes.
And Madam Chair, we had an online hand raised who's now in person.
Okay, please come up.
Very loud always. Good morning. I am Dr. Stacy Baker. Thank you very much for hearing my comments. I have extreme concern about the environmental impact on these projects. I do agree that the elephant in the room are these VRBOs and Airbnbs. We have plenty of opportunity for people who are visiting to be able to stay in these places, but yet homes are being purchased, as previously mentioned, and that takes away from workforce housing. I am very concerned about the fact that TRPA has approved some horrible projects like the Tahoe Beach Club. The Tahoe Beach Club was undeniably workforce housing. It devastated Kale Meadow. Please consider, when you're approving these projects, sensitive watershed, riparian areas, and water table. Because if we don't consider that, we can't have a healthy forest. And so many of these projects don't. I wholeheartedly agree with Ellie Waller. I wholeheartedly agree with Alexis and Mountain Area Preservation. I wholeheartedly agree with the Sierra Club and all these, Doug Flaherty, Clean Air Alliance, all of these other people that have tried to communicate with you about the severe environmental impact that these projects have. This rush to approve, it has been going on for years. The impacts of the beach club, that should be a glaring sign of what happens. We have devastated Kale Meadow. We have approved we just keep approving, and it's not okay. As a resident who left Los Angeles almost 35 years ago, I now regularly get stuck in traffic up here. This is a big deal. Traffic from tourists, from residents needs to be considered. A safe evacuation plan. Geographically, we could have an earthquake, not just wildfire, but an earthquake. We need to be able to understand that we have too little road and too much cars. It's happening. It happened a week ago. Some snowmobiler had an accident. Kingsbury Grade was closed for several hours. People were sitting up there. So please, we have to have thorough, comprehensive investigation into what this environment can have and what this infrastructure can hold. The elephant in the room, as eloquently stated, are these VRBOs. We really need to understand they have removed community cohesiveness, and they just continue to increase density that we may be at critical capacity and not be able to do these type of numbers. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. And I do just want to say quickly to our public commenters, be you in person or online, thank you for showing up. Thank you. Your voice matters. We hear your comments. We read your comments. We can disagree. We will disagree. You've shown up with integrity. You've shown up to make your voice heard. We notice and we appreciate it. We are here unpaid, but we are here to solve the same problems you're here to solve. So thank you for the way that you're participating in your government, and thank you for doing it respectfully. Let's move on then to the approval of the agenda. Staff, are there any changes?
Madam Chair, there are no changes. If I may give you a lay of the land for the timing. This is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. My recommendation is that we would proceed through the meeting, and then we do have lunch provided for the board. And so to continue without taking a lunch break is my recommendation, but we can see how it goes.
Okay. We will deem the agenda approved as posted then. Agenda item 5, approval of minutes. These are from December 17th on page 37 of your packet. Anyone wishing to make a change? And if not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Let's move on to the TRPA consent calendar. Agenda item 6, there are 4 items on consent. 1 item was reviewed by the Operations and Governance Committee. 1 item was reviewed by the Legal Committee, and 2 items were not reviewed in any governing board committee. Brooke, Member Lane, can we please have a report out from Ops and Governance on the December financials?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The Operations and Governance Committee did receive a detailed report on our financials from July 1st through December 31st. We're about halfway through. We are halfway through our fiscal year. And the financials are on track compared to budget. We also had a quarterly treasurer's report info item. Investments continue to perform as expected relative to the market and are within investment policy requirements. Although we are seeing, as the nation is, a decline in percentage points. And so our investments are not going to return as great as they have been in the past, but they're still on pace with the budget.
Thank you. Any questions from board members on consent calendar number 1? Okay. Next up, the Legal Committee. We met on an enforcement action this morning out of Obexer's Marina. There was a situation where a boat owner, a boat launcher, attempted to tamper with the Tahoe seal. Our staff recommended an enforcement action of a $5,000 fine. The boat did not launch, but just for tampering with the seal as a deterrent and as a message that you can't do that. It came out unanimously out of legal, and I am happy to answer any questions or comments you may have on that consent calendar item. And if I can't, I'll call up Steve Sweet or Graham. Cody?
Yeah, no, I was just really curious about what the limit is on these kind of things, and I'm wondering, like, if the boat would have launched and got into the water, can we fine them 25,000, or is there a limit at 5,000? Kind of what is our limit on what we can fine?
Thanks. And I'll kick some of this to Graham, but I think what we discussed at legal this morning was that there's sort of 2 code enforcement provisions there. They didn't launch, but the tampering was its own code violation. The 5,000 per day was the one code for tampering. We haven't really had many of these, happily. And so the last one we had, Graham sort of dug back in time. There was some $4,000 ones. And so this was even more of a deterrent than that. We're not barred by that 5,000. This wasn't settlement. And it did sound like the parties showed sincere remorse and desire to settle. But what we talked about at legal this morning was if we see more of these, or if that number is not a deterrent, we certainly can go up from that number. And if I got anything wrong there or missed anything, Graham, please correct me.
No, very good. Just Graham St. Michel for the record. The compact just as $5,000 per day per violation limit, and the compact does allow us to seek more for willful and more egregious violations. So yeah, it is something that in this case we probably could have sought more. If we were going to court, we would have sought more. $5,000 represents the settlement agreement that's proposed for board consideration.
Great. Yeah, I guess maybe just a thought of when it goes out into the media that it was a $5,000 fine. However, if they would have launched, it could have been up to 25,000. And if that message gets out there, I think that's just more deterrent. And if it's within their scope, I think it's a good thing to put out.
Member Aldine?
As we discussed in legal early this morning, we're very fortunate to have businesses like Obexer's Marina participating in the effort to keep people honest and to prevent unauthorized launching of watercraft. Fortunately, this watercraft was not contaminated, but had it launched and had it contained or had attached mussels, for example, or any other form of contaminant, then the fee, obviously, the charge or the amount charged would have been considerably more, but then we would be dealing with the possibility of another invasive species being introduced to Lake Tahoe. So the cooperation of our partners in this endeavor is extremely important, and we thank Obexers for notifying us of this attempt.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, consent calendar item number 3 is the NV Energy Incline Substation Expansion Project, 0 Sweetwater Road, Incline Village, Washoe County, assessor parcel number 130-15103, TRPA file ERSP 2024-0342. Do any board members have any questions about this consent calendar? Not seeing any. Finally, consent calendar number 4 is a resolution in recognition of National Radon Action Month. Anyone have any questions or comments on this one? All right, and if no one has any further questions or comments, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, Tracy, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Ms. Aldine?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Ms. Conrad Seda?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Fastinos?
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson?
Yes.
Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Ms. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Settlemeyer?
Yes.
Ms. Luma?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Let's move on then to agenda item 7, which is public hearings. 7A is the notice of preparation for an environmental impact statement to analyze the cultivating community, conserving the basin policy recommendations. This TRPA initiative aims to address the housing crisis in the Lake Tahoe Basin while maintaining and improving environmental protections. This initiative focuses on updated regional environmental growth management policies to ensure accessible and sustainable housing. Information on this item can be found on page 123. And I think I'd like to turn it over to Director Reagan and Mr. Hester, who will turn it to Jacob to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I have a few introductory remarks, as well as Mr. Hester, and then the bulk of the presentation will be given by Jacob Stock. And I want to join our board chairs. Thank you to the public who were here today in person, online, for constructive dialogue. We've had so much incredible participation from the community in this housing initiative, and it matters. And I think what the board heard, a snapshot today of what we've heard now for several years, is there are differences of opinion, and that is always the case in Tahoe. But you are charged with harmonizing that, and that is what we are embarking to do, where we will listen to the community. We will today embark on the environmental review that is necessary to guide your decision making. And I think it's a good example of how we can tackle difficult topics like housing and do it in a really thoughtful way and relying on evidence and science to guide us. I will say, from the beginning of time of TRPA's authority in the basin, our environmental standards and thresholds have been our guiding light and will continue to be. If you look back at our regional plan update of 2012, the regional plan recognized that we needed to make more progress on lake clarity and our water quality thresholds. We're updating those standards. You'll be looking at that next month. But that is very much embedded in this housing work, that we want to make progress on our thresholds. We are required to maintain and achieve these thresholds. And that is a very big focus of the housing initiative. And it recognizes that thresholds don't exist in a vacuum. The land use, form, and function affects the health of the lake, the health of the air, our soils, and all of our standards that we hold so dear. And so we have, bless you, this very big challenge of harmonizing these standards together, but doing so in a way that also addresses this crisis of affordability in our community And it is if you turn on the news today, you will hear affordability probably 1,000 times, not just here in our local area, throughout the country, particularly in resort communities and worldwide. So this is a crisis that's being tackled globally. We're not immune from that. But what we are trying to do is look at our right role as we limit development, we cap development, we are maintaining our limits on development, very unique in the country in the way that we do it here in Tahoe, and it's very complex. But yet that also has a role to play in price points and affordability. And so we're trying to nudge that market, try to steer the power of the market, which is beyond our control, to build more affordable and smaller units. And so I couldn't be more proud of the work that Jacob and Karen and Alyssa and Kaylee and our entire staff, our legal team, our communications team. I couldn't be more proud of this team that's not just had a couple of workshops and done a report, but we've actually gone into our communities, nights, weekends, events, going into Spanish speaking communities and having multilingual communications. Like, this is a very, very big body of work that we're building on multiple phases. The first phase, as you heard and you saw in the staff summary, was in 2021, looking at accessory dwelling units. We had the phase 2 incentives in 2023, and now we're kicking off this really momentous occasion to study the policies that you will ultimately be deciding on more than a year from now. So very proud of the team for the professionalism and the good work, and also want to remind the board of the incentives in the 2012 regional plan, which acknowledge the commuting patterns that were just beginning to really shift and have gone into overdrive in terms of the amount of people that can't afford to work here coming out of COVID. And the incentives to restore old rundown properties. You cannot drive around the lake. I had the good fortune yesterday to have a meeting with the fire chiefs on the North Shore and did the full lap and really went into those communities to see the conditions that our community members are living in. And you cannot drive around the lake without seeing blight and rundown buildings that are energy inefficient, that are wasting energy, and greenhouse gas emissions are another concern related to old and rundown properties. Not to mention the substandard housing that people are forced to live in, sleeping in shifts, living in mold. We have new and emerging rodent problems in this community. Like, these are real issues, and it's not acceptable for the condition of housing that we have for our local communities. So all of these things are going to be looked at and addressed in a thoughtful way. And I appreciate the board's attention. This is our main agenda item for today. And so we appreciate your thoughtfulness as we embark on this environmental review. And I think John Hester will try to give you a framework for what the decision space is today. And then Jacob will get going with the presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. John Hester, Chief Operating Officer. As Julie said, a little framework, a little context. I want to make just 3 brief comments. Number 1, this is you all giving us direction on the notice to move forward with a notice of preparation for an environmental impact statement. It is not agreement or disagreement with any particular regulation or program that we propose to analyze. So that's first point. Second point is these options, as Julie mentioned, as you've heard before, as Vice Chair Honigman, who's on the Tahoe Living Working Group, has said, have come out of a very, very rigorous process, including a couple workshops with you, with the Advisory Planning Commission, the Tahoe Living Working Group, a new community partners group with social service providers that was convened for this, and that we will use in the future. Public opinion surveys, pop-ups, North Shore, South Shore public meetings. So these are options that we think the community supports. You will hear some that people still want to add in that haven't been coming out of the process. Jacob will talk about that. So that's the second thing, is what you've got is a set of options from a very rigorous process. The third point I want to make is that the whole point of doing this environmental impacts study and the whole reason for looking at these options is when we do come back, we will use that information as staff to prepare some recommendations for you and the Advisory Planning Commission. And we will have a lot more information so you can do a lot better job making a decision. So that's really what we're here today, is for you all to help us guide us, direct us on what you want us to include in that process of and not being analyzed so we can make a better decision. We're not here saying we're going to do this or not do that. So I want to make sure that's clear to both you and to the public. So with that, happy to introduce Jacob Stock to go through what we did to date.
Yeah, thanks, John and Julie. Jacob Stock, Senior Planner with TRPA. I appreciate all of the introduction on housing. I'm here today to actually talk about what that is there in that picture on the right side there. I've received a lot of questions, mostly off the record, about this. Are they catering pans, as Julie Reagan believes? Are they some type of greenhouse thing? I'm here to set the record straight and tell you that they are clear bottom kayaks. If you've never been in one of those. So now that that's settled, let's talk about something else. How about workforce housing? So the other thing I'm here to talk about is an environmental impact statement, or EIS, for the Cultivating Community Conserving the Basin project. So this is a program looking at how we can adjust TRPA policy and code to better support housing for our workforce, like the guy with the clear bottom kayaks, and to maintain and even accelerate attainment of environmental thresholds and the regional plan so we can all enjoy clear bottom kayaks now and long into the future. So this EIS is an important milestone for the project, and I hope you'll support a motion to analyze these potential policies in the EIS. So here's what I'm going to be talking about today. In this presentation, the main points I'll cover is what is an environmental impact statement, or EIS. I'll give you some background on that. What is being studied in this EIS in particular, and I'll go over some of the key policies that you all saw in November, review some of those. What's changed since November? So we've made some changes based on the input that we received from you, and I want to talk to you about that. And then finally, I want to go through the next steps for the project and for the environmental impact statement. Next slide. Okay, what's an EIS? So an EIS is our highest level of environmental analysis. It analyzes environmental impacts of a potential action, including alternatives and mitigations for any of those impacts if they're discovered. As John mentioned, you're not being asked to approve anything today with this EIS. You're just being asked really to set the envelope or really the sandbox of study for possible policies and code changes that we could make through this process. So defining the extent of what we could do in this project and analyzing that. So we can scale those back in our final policy, which you'll see early next year. But we can't go further. So we want to cast a wider net right now and create a bigger sandbox where possible. Next slide. Here's a list of the more than a dozen areas that will be studied in the EIS. It covers all of our thresholds, and it's pretty comprehensive from the start. But once we initiate the EIS through the notice of preparation, there will be a public scoping period. Ours will be 45 days, a 45-day period. And that'll be an opportunity to expand this list, to add to it. And in some cases, also to get more specific about what should be considered under each of these categories. So there'll be opportunities for both and to define the scope of what we're really going to look at and consider in this EIS. So more on that later. Next slide, please. What's being studied in this EIS? So that's all detailed in attachment A to your packet, which you had an opportunity to review in November when we did those workshops, if you'll remember. I'll review some of the key points from that attachment and also important changes that we made since November based on your feedback. Next slide. But first, a reminder that all of these proposed policies are based on some project goals and objectives which you approved last March. So at the heart of this, what we want to do is meet our housing need while maintaining and improving environmental conservation and preservation, that overarching project vision there at the top. And this EIS is going to be really important to understanding if we're meeting that goal through this policy package. Next slide. So John and Julie both touched on this a little bit. These policies weren't just, created by staff in our cubicles. These are based on a really substantial engagement process with you, our leadership, expert advisory groups like the APC, the Tahoe Living Working Group, the Community Partner Group, and with the public. So here are some numbers that we're really proud of from that engagement process so far. The engagement doesn't end here. It continues, but here's where we're at right now. We've had 5 meetings of the Community Partner Group, 5 of the Tahoe Living Working Group, 20 stakeholder meetings. We've had 6 public workshops, and that's not including 3 Spanish mini workshops where my colleague Kaylee actually went to these organizations and met with folks in their own spaces and held small workshops in Spanish. We've had 5 formal items with you all, with the board, 2,224 respondents to our surveys, including 217 responses in Spanish, all adding up to about, we estimate approximately 3,000 people engaged in this process so far, and 600 of whom were engaged in Spanish. And so I think that is really cool and really illustrates the amount of input that went into this proposal. Next slide. Okay. Getting into the key policies that we want to analyze in the EIS, this will be a review. The next 3 slides will be a review for you all. You already saw this in November, and I'll get into what's changed a little bit later in the presentation, but I want to start here with policies to reduce the time and cost to build workforce housing. So the first bullet here is a policy. We want to look at replenishing our bonus unit pools by removing development rights from the commercial floor area, tourist accommodation unit, and persons at one time pools. Persons at one time or payouts are recreational development right, if you're less familiar with those. So taking those development rights and converting those into bonus units. So they'll no longer be able to be used in their pools, but they'll be moved to a bonus unit pool. And some of those bonus units would be reserved for affordable by design housing, which I can speak about later if you're interested. Most of them, however, would go to deed restricted housing. We also want to consider a bonus unit conversion ratio that reflects the relative environmental impact of a bonus unit compared to other development. We want to analyze allowing junior accessory dwelling units, or JADUs or equivalent, as accessory to a single family home. So if you're not familiar with a JADU, these are small 500 square foot or less apartments within the footprint of an existing home. And so this policy would allow these apartments to be created without a separate development right. We want to look at policies that ensure that all new development contributes proportionally to meeting the housing need as demonstrated in our housing needs assessment. We want to look at scaling TRPA fees to reflect the latest data on environmental impact and on the cost of doing business. And finally, single family homes are currently exempt from TRPA environmental review. We want to look at holding small multifamily housing up to a 4-plex to that same standard. And we want to look at doing the same for deed restricted housing that's in a redevelopment scenario or infill development. Next slide. Water quality is foundational to everything that we do as an agency. This water quality component here would update land coverage and stormwater policies to focus on improving water quality while still allowing for compact infill housing in appropriate locations. The idea here is that we want to ensure that multifamily housing doesn't face stricter or more costly water quality requirements than single family. And in doing so, we think we can actually improve water quality overall. And so, for example, one of the policies where we want to analyze here would be to analyze allowing more parcel level coverage for multifamily development with the goal overall, and this will play out in the EIS with the goal of actually seeing less coverage basin wide. Maintenance of stormwater systems and BMPs is going to be really key here to these policies. And so we want to analyze new ways to ensure effective monitoring and maintenance of our stormwater systems and BMPs. Next slide. Finally, we want to analyze new strategies for increasing housing choice. So we want to analyze new zoning for missing middle housing. We want to encourage local governments to unlock existing housing for a local workforce, including homes for multi-generational households. We heard a lot from the public and from you all that we need more family-sized housing. One way to do this could be to allow jurisdictions to increase height and density if they demonstrate progress toward unlocking vacant housing stock, and we have some policy proposals that we think could do that. We also heard a lot of support for a regional housing authority that would coordinate funding and programming for workforce housing across all of our different jurisdictions here in the basin, and so we want to look into that as well. Next slide. What's changed since we last met in November? You'll remember we brought this proposal to you in November and we got some really great feedback. We made some important changes to the proposal based on the feedback that we got from you, and I want to highlight some of those changes here. And as John and I both noted earlier, there's still time to hone in on specific details, to scale stuff back after we've done this analysis in the EIS. And so we really, when we took your input and your feedback, we really tried to err on the side of analyzing more as a best practice for environmental impact statements. So here I want to speak first about tiered project incentives. So this change was really shaped by your input and by input from partners like the League to Save Lake Tahoe and MAP. We clarified a tiered structure for cultivating community conserving the basin policies. So under this tiered structure, all proposed incentives in the policy package would apply to deed restricted, affordable, and moderate income housing. We call that tier 1. There are some incentives for achievable and affordable by design housing. We call that tier 2, and no incentives for unrestricted housing, or tier 3. So I think this change really demonstrates how this project is geared towards meeting our housing need with a focus on deed restricted housing, while still recognizing that there is this big inequity among unrestricted housing. So between large second homes and smaller homes for locals. And that needs to be addressed as well. And it is in this proposal. It's important to remember that the vast majority of our workforce, about 90% of our workforce lives in, over 90% of our workforce lives in unrestricted housing. And so we need both deed restricted and unrestricted housing to meet our housing goals. Next slide. So building on that idea of needing both, also based on input from the board and APC, we clarified a method for scaling development rights and fees. So we want to analyze a system of scaled development rights based on conversion ratios. And this is in response to input from the board and the public that you wanted to see incentives, again, supporting housing for families, not just studio apartments, to address overcrowding in our housing stock. So I think this proposal for scaling development rights allows more opportunity for family-sized housing, and I can talk more about that if you all are interested, compared to some of the alternatives that we had come up with in our previous version of this policy. And we still want to look at addressing the size and impact of homes through mitigation and permitting fees, and so we're proposing to do that as well. Next slide. So we also heard from the governing board and APC that ADU policy should align with state and local policy wherever possible. Ideally, this would pave the way for our local partners to take up permitting of ADUs in the basin. So we set a cap of 1,200 square feet for ADUs to be eligible for the incentives in this package. And that number is consistent with policy in Washoe County, Placer, El Dorado County, and the city of South Lake Tahoe. Everywhere in the basin that ADUs are currently allowed. So we believe that it meets those goals that you all set for us. Next slide. Okay, I got a bonus slide here for you all. On the settlement agreement, we got a comment on some points on the settlement agreement with MAP. So we went ahead and added this slide here. As part of the settlement agreement for Tahoe Living Phase 2, TRPA committed to facilitating good faith discussion of the 6 items that are summarized here on this slide. All of these items were addressed in staff reports, minutes, and meeting materials and discussions throughout the process. Some garnered more discussion than others. Some were supported by our advisory groups, like the Tahoe Living Working Group. Others were not. Actually, 3 of these are in the proposal in attachment A. So there's a typo in the slide, the ones with the stars next to it. You can add the refining criteria for additional height to that. That's also going to be analyzed in the EIS. The other 3 will have the opportunity to continue to consider and discuss through the environmental analysis. So just wanted to make you all aware of that. Next slide. So as we get to the part where where we ask for direction on the environmental impact statement, I want to review a few points about what an EIS is and where we are in this process. So the policies analyzed in the EIS again represent the envelope of study for the project. We want to study the impact of these potential policies, and we can adjust and scale back if needed based on what we find in that analysis. You're not approving anything today. Just directing us to proceed with an environmental analysis that will give you the information that you need to make the right decision when it is time to consider approval of some policy changes. Next slide. So a little bit on next steps. Following, if the board chooses to direct staff to initiate an environmental impact statement, we will release a notice of preparation. That will start a scoping period where we'll ask the public to provide input on what impacts should be analyzed in the EIS. That will last 6 weeks or 45 days. And we plan to have a scoping meeting at the APC on February 11th, where folks can give their impacts, give their spoken input as well as written input. And the whole scoping period will result in a scoping summary report that will go into the official scope for this EIS that we develop. There will be more opportunity for public comment in the summer when we have a draft EIS available. And there will be a review period for that as well. And we hope to have a final EIS and policy proposal in the fall and early 2027 to consider approval. And so with that context, I invite any discussion, questions, and motion to initiate the EIS if you choose.
Thank you. And I've said it before, but thank you for the incredibly hard work, the feedback, the detail you put into this. Thanks, Director Reagan. Thanks, staff. This is great. Opening it to questions or comments. I can just go around the horn if everyone probably has one. Cody, please lead us off.
Sure. Yeah, thank you again for the great presentation. So I'm kind of curious with, definitely recognizing the differences between all the jurisdictions around the basin, and especially in South Lake Tahoe, we are much different than most all of the other jurisdictions. But as our staff came today to talk about us wanting the market rate housing for multifamily units, especially, I think that we could potentially look at a program that would allow for, once each jurisdiction has reached a number of affordable units, that it could unlock more market rate housing. So maybe we set that number at 500, and we are at 600 currently, but I don't believe any other jurisdiction is close. And so if a jurisdiction is able to reach that number, then market rate affordable housing, essentially, or market rate multifamily housing is what I should say, would become open. And I think that's for us a big goal. So I guess I'm curious, is that something that could be part of a policy that we created, like a threshold system, or could be considered an incentive system?
Yeah, I can speak to kind of, I think, thank you for the comment, Jacob Stock, for the record. I think what we're trying to do here with our incentives, you know, we have some light incentives for unrestricted affordable by design housing is what we're calling it. And we can, you know, I can go into what that more detail about what that means if you're interested. The intention of that is really to recognize that we haven't seen the amount of deed restricted housing built that was originally envisioned in way back in the 1987 regional plan, but also in the 2012 regional plan. And we want to experiment with some options to get workforce housing built in other ways. And so we have these light incentives for affordable by design housing. We have some strategies for monitoring that. And so that's sort of a step towards experimenting with this idea. We have some other incentives, like for multifamily housing, or maybe not incentives, but looking at scaled development rights for multifamily housing that could apply to unrestricted housing potentially as well. So I think we have some stuff in here that creates some room for what you're talking about, and some room for experimentation and seeing what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that again, you know, hearing the concerns out of North Shore that they definitely don't want market rate housing, right? Well, in South Lake Tahoe, we're in a different place, and I think that a big part of that is because we've created the affordable units that we need, over 600. And it seems like it will take quite a while, but it should be the goal of these other jurisdictions to also create 500, right? And so they're protected from not having market rate housing until those goals are reached. And I think that it protects the different jurisdictions and some of their needs, while it also gives us our needs. And so I think it's something that we should consider. And maybe because I hear today, these decisions aren't being made, but it will be reviewed. So it seems prudent to review it so that we could possibly make that decision in the future. To just look at, okay, we know right now South Lake Tahoe would be unlocked, but we can project it's going to be 10 years before Placer County is able to reach that threshold to unlock that. So the EIS, I think, could break that down and look at that.
Yeah, I think I actually have, now that you've clarified a bit, Jacob Stock, for the record, I have a thought on this that I think it could be within the scope of the EIS. We have this idea in the package of trying to create incentives for local governments to unlock existing housing for their workforce. And I think, you know, that a kind of incentive program like you're talking about for local jurisdictions to do that work, I think could fall within the scope of that proposal.
Great. My last comment would just be that I would also propose that we would also make all that market rate housing be deed restricted to not be a vacation home rental. And our development rights in the city, that would already happen based on the development rights we would grant. But I think that needs to be a TRPA policy, that if we were to allow the market rate housing, it has to be deed restricted to no overnight rentals.
Ms. Bennett?
Yeah. Cody pretty much said what I was going to say, just listening to the public comment, that obviously North and South are very, very different. And maybe we need to listen to that and look at the EIS in the exact same way. It being on the Nevada side, Northern Nevada, Southern Nevada, very, very different. And so I just think we really need to listen to that and put that into there. And it sounds like he's already got a plan for that. So.
And I can add,
please.
John Hester, add to Jacob's response to both of these comments. I think from the regional perspective, what we would try to do is something that captures the concept of everyone has their share and they have options when they've dealt with their share. I don't think we would say a particular number or you have to do it this way. I mean, I could envision, and having worked been doing this long enough. I've worked where they used to have housing opportunity plans. I don't know if anybody else remembers those, federally mandated, but it would be something more along the lines of a percentage of your population or of your housing stock. And it would vary because obviously, you know, South Lake Tahoe has about half the population and some other places have less. So you wouldn't want the same number. Some Placer County may have some programs they want to use to do it that are different than the ones, to your point, Ms. Bennett, about there's differences. But if we could set an outcome that's consistent regionally and provide some local flexibility, I think that's easily done when we start getting more analysis through from the EIS.
Ms. Conrad Zeta?
Yeah, thanks. No, I like the direction that we're going. I think rather than selecting particular numbers, addressing the heterogeneity of the region and the heterogeneity of the population and how it's distributed is really important. And so maybe setting some standards for the EIS that just ask specifically to address that heterogeneity, I think is really useful. And it could be an analysis of policies at varying population levels or something like that versus, you know, arbitrarily picking a number that may not apply everywhere. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the market rate. I'm glad to see no incentives, but what about disincentives to, you know, what are some disincentives that we can look at so that we get more of these housing projects that we want to see coming before the board? Because so far we haven't necessarily made a lot of headway there. Most of the decisions we see coming before us are within, you know, legal bounds. They're allowed to come before us. They're meeting all the standards. And so we have nothing in our quiver right now to say, no, we actually really want to see more of these affordable housing. So I think you're going in that direction. I would just be more explicit that, you know, the goal of this EIS is to analyze and get us to a point where we have more tools at the end of the EIS that we can deploy to really go after the type of housing we see here, and just be super explicit that, you know, we know that all of you coming forward with this market rate housing, you're following existing rules. We're actively looking for rules to really bring in more of what we're looking for and not more of that. And maybe it is the deed restricted so that you don't have more VRBOs or Airbnbs, right? Maybe that's one of them. But I think just be that direct so that developers know this is where we're heading, right? Start thinking of ways through this EIS process that you can come to us with more affordable housing, because that's what we want to see.
Can I add one comment to respond to that? John Hester again. One of the comments we've heard is, you know, we haven't financial incentives or mitigation measures, things like that. But another comment we've heard is process. The process right now makes it very easy for a large, remote, single family, what some people call McMansions, and very difficult for smaller or close-in houses that are for more affordable purposes. And we've heard people say that process needs to be flipped. So I think in the notice of preparation, we can say, is it actually more important for you to spend more time looking at a big house that's further out that has, you know, environmental impacts, maybe in sensitive lands or more trip generation or something like that, and less if it's somewhere where we already have the coverage dealt with and a stormwater system and transit and so forth. So I think that's in the notice of preparation draft that we've put together to look at maybe rejiggering that process so it reflects what we desire.
Yeah, I love that, being explicit about the intent. And I just remembered I'd be remiss if I didn't beat the drum of enforcement and making sure that you're looking at what the right level of funding is for enforcement actions, so that you can't, you know, if we move forward with these incentives, we have enough enforcement funding and staffing within TRPA to actually then ensure that the steps that we're taking are being met. So that's another piece I would just add in there, is like, as salaries rise and as population changes, how much enforcement funding and how many people do we need at TRPA to do that?
Ms. Fastinos.
Yes, I definitely agree with all the comments that have been made previously. And I guess what I still struggle with is that all of the documentation in the world doesn't change the developer world. You know? And so, you know, I very much appreciate that we have to start with this. My concern continues to be how to incentivize developers to actually build affordable housing. that is something that, I mean, obviously it's not the subject matter of the CIS, but that remains my big concern. Thank you.
Director Settlemeyer?
Appreciate this opportunity to speak. You know, this has come so far from where TRPA has been, and it's such a large advancement towards the goal of trying to help assist with attainable affordable housing. And we'll see if we can accomplish that. I share my colleagues' concerns that sometimes economics are more realistic and could be problematic. I just hope that as we write things up, we be cautious as it pertains to particularly small counties. I understand there's a desire to encourage all of the counties to make sure they have a minimum number. But we better put an exemption because Carson City doesn't have that issue or people. So I just hope that we make sure to write that in there, that maybe you need to have like 1,000 residents living in the valley, in the Tahoe area first, before we actually start to put rules on people. However, in that respect, you know, we do have, I think, 1 or 2 residents in Carson City, maybe. But you know, in that respect. But with that, it is a remarkable feat that we're doing and pushing them forward. Thank you.
Ms. Gustafson?
Thank you. I first off want to thank staff. I'm an incredible engagement and the public process you've engaged in. That takes a tremendous amount of effort. And I want to commend the public who have stayed engaged and really come back to the table to work with us, because we all understand what a critical issue this is. And I would argue more so on the North Shore, as we've articulated time and time again, that the lack of new development ties our hands to requiring new development to pay. So we, in particular in Placer County, right now we have 183 new units that have been built for affordable and deed restricted housing. But what we've been trying to focus on as well is unlocking existing units. So our workforce housing program, where we've helped young families purchase homes, has been a focus, as well as our lease to locals program, in which we're serving, I just got the numbers because of all the comments that were made. 16 homes have been purchased by young families for a cost of about $4 million to the county general fund. 344 leased to locals. Locals have been housed with about $2 million that we've put in to secure their housing with the county's backing. And now, just recently, with a little over $1 million, we have had 4 launch pad new small units built that will be deed restricted. All of these are deed restricted, no issue of VRBO or Airbnb in those. And then also emergency retention of housing for those that are most vulnerable to losing housing due to unfortunate accidents in their life, loss of their car, a spouse, whatever. We've put about $500,000 into that program and are just about next Tuesday to approving another $500,000 in that account, as well as another $3 million for the Launchpad program, which is new housing. So we are really doing everything I can get a penny on to incentivize both unlocking existing housing so we don't have cumulative impacts. And so that's my defense of anything North Shore. No, we're behind. We've been saying that, and we get sued every time we turn around through these processes, and that is a disincentive to all new development. We have major requirements on new development to house 50% of their employees, as well as pay into these in lieu of fees and develop the housing. But if we don't get anything moving forward, and I understand there's differing views on that, but that is how local government depends on reinvestment. All that aside, I've now defended my county, I think, a little bit, and some of the things I've been fighting for 5 years. We've also acquired properties that we're sitting on trying to get developed. And part of trying to get those developed is some of these incentive programs. But most important to the discussion today, make sure the EIS, as you are doing, looks at the maximum potential impact to the environment. That is what our charge is on an EIS. These policy discussions of how many units and how they're used it needs to come back to the board, but we need to make sure that EIS, beyond hopefully anybody's consideration, that it is conservative, in the fact that it maximizes any potential environmental impact so we can stand up and move forward on this housing, hopefully without any litigation, and move to getting some of this housing done. So it's going to take a combination of all those things, restrictions on VRBOs and Airbnbs. We've already, I think all the jurisdictions have some form of that now. We're not seeing growth in that category, by the way. In North Shore, that has stayed a stagnant number since 2019. So, you know, what are we doing in all these areas to get affordable housing done? So thank you.
Mr. Rice?
Oh, where do I begin? I'm not going to jump in up to my neck on this one. But some of the complaints that I've been getting is when did TRPA get into social engineering? And what has that got to do with the color of my house? Or how much the lake clarity improves or doesn't improve? How on earth can forcing me to build something on my property that I don't want to build help the lake? That's a great argument. And I, as much as I can, defend what we're doing. I believe in what we're doing. But part of the problems on the Douglas County side is that there is a difference between north and south, but there is between east and west. A lot of the area down here is flat. A lot of what we have, all the way from Douglas County, with the exception of the casino core, in Douglas County, in Carson City, and in Washoe County, everything's uphill or downhill, depending upon where you're situated. And it's difficult to get dirt to hold a house when you've got a 4% grade. And one of the things that we've been doing in Douglas is trying to improve our workforce housing in the valley, because we can't figure out where to put it up here. And we're trying to preserve what little workforce housing we have. And dirt's expensive up here. And when something gets run down, developers come in and they look at it and what's it going to cost me to tear this down and put something in? And then what's my return? So they look at it, shake their heads, and they walk away. So that's something that we're going to have to deal with. I don't know how we're going to do it. And if we increase the population on the east side and we have another fire or earthquake or heaven forbid tsunami, which could, well, I know it's got a different word when it's on a lake, but a ski, I think I'm high enough that I'm okay. But part of the resistance that we get is how in the hell do we get out of here if something like that happens? And I know there was a great deal of concern about Highway 50 becoming one lane in each direction, which thank goodness that's gone forever, I hope. But we need to try to figure out how to get the people from the valley up here without getting more cars involved. And they're working on trying to get transportation. Well, they're working on it. They have great transportation in the valley, and then getting people up the hill. Anybody that's driven on 207 in the morning can see everybody parking on the side at the parking lot down at the at Foothill. And we need to increase the ridership so that we can have more people from the valley taking buses, getting themselves up here, and keeping the vehicles, VMTs. We have so many. Oh, well. Anyway, that's my comment.
Ms. Aldine?
Thank you. I want to echo the comments made by the other board members about the Herculean task this has been. And I want to applaud staff for all of their good efforts. I guess Cindy kind of stole my thunder, as we talk about the socioeconomic issues and how they relate to the environment and the need to maintain the nexus between this analysis and environmental gain. And it's a bit of a slippery slope. I mean, we'll see what the outcome is, but obviously, when you talk about, for example, I think it's under section housing choice, increase housing choice in the Tahoe Basin, simplifying development process, which would include facilitating and reducing costs for affordable and workforce housing, which might include TRPA fee relief. A lot of the fees that we charge go to the environmental improvement program. And I'm concerned about the trade-off. And I think we're going to need a fiscal analysis, which is probably outside the scope of the EIS. I mean, they're not analyzing the fiscal impacts. There is a nexus because those fiscal impacts are going to translate into reduced money for the EIP program. But I think we just need to be cautious that that is, as Cindy points out, our chief mandate, and we can't lose track of that. And I want to confirm something. One woman who testified early this morning, was concerned about the fact that people are interested at some point in their lives in transitioning to single family homes. I mean, some people like to live in condos, others prefer not to. Typically single family homes are a little more spacious and there's more area around those homes to, afford greater opportunities for the families. But attached condos that are currently existing can be subdivided, right? Because they are constructed through the two-step subdivision process, right? It's not just new construction.
Do you want me? Jacob Stock for the record. Yeah, we currently our subdivision section of our code does allow, it doesn't allow for lot and block subdivision, as you all know, but it allows for condominium subdivision, both for attached and detached units. With everything, the way that interacts with local regulations can complicate things. And so, I think one of the things that we could work on with our local partners is making sure that's clear, and any barriers to detached condo subdivision that exists between the translation between regional and local code, to the extent that it supports workforce housing, is addressed.
I think that would be a good idea, if there was some commonality in the rules and regs, because that is, as I say, ultimately people would like to buy the home they live in, whether it's a condo, a townhouse, or a single family home. So giving them that opportunity when, their financial position allows it would be, I think, useful. And under single family homes, I know there was a reference to this by Senator Daley at the at the Oversight Committee meeting last week about in the impacts of larger homes and how we can require, perhaps it's alluded to in this provision on page 135, that we would require more rights for unrestricted single family homes. I mean, each lot in the Tahoe Basin has one residential unit of use by right. So that's not something we can tamper with. I mean, that was done years ago to avoid a takings case. So I'm assuming that's not what we're envisioning, right?
No, Jacob Stock for the record. I would clarify that and Graham can jump in as well, that each legal lot has a potential residential unit that can be combined with an allocation to create a residential unit of use.
I understand.
And so we're not proposing to change that. No.
That used to be referred to as just a development right, but then I know we changed our nomenclature. So, okay, well, that's a good thing. So we're talking about potentially allocations requiring more than a single allocation for a single family home. I mean, I think that I don't think you can necessarily claim that every single family home regardless of how large it is, has a greater environmental impact than an apartment complex, considering that they're only occupied in many cases a couple of months out of the year. They don't generate a lot of VMT. I think the better way to approach this is to say, to put some sort of restrictions on the importation of coverage. Because a lot of these large homes, the lot doesn't have enough coverage to accommodate the footprint of the home they want to build. But if you don't permit the importation of coverage and maybe restrict that, for example, to public service projects or affordable housing projects, maybe that would be one way of scaling down the size of these homes.
Yeah, thank you. Jacob Stock for the record again. So this package includes a lot of policy proposals in it. So, you zeroed in on the development rights, the scale development rights piece. We also have proposals related to how to adjust our fees, and that includes adjusting our coverage transfer fees. So we're looking at, through the EIS, analyzing a whole, like I said in my presentation, analyzing a whole suite of potential policies with the understanding that, we maybe aren't going to do all of them, but we want to know that the impact of all of them so we can choose the appropriate solution.
Okay, so I guess my last question is, where does an EIS environmental impact statement kind of transition into a socioeconomic analysis? In other words, are our consultants actually going to be able to analyze the environmental impact of some of these policies, possible policy changes? I mean, is that what they've been tasked to do? Because environmental impact statements typically focus on environmental impacts as opposed to socioeconomic impacts. So I'm a little bit confused how we're going to integrate these two.
Yeah, the environmental impact statement, and actually, could we flip to I think it's slide, I don't remember what number it was. Slide 5 of my proposal. It gives a list of, here we go. The list of everything that is analyzed in an environmental impact statement, just your generic off-the-shelf environmental impact statement, if you want to put it that way, pre-scoping. Of course, this list would be expanded through scoping and detailed during scoping, but this is what is going to be considered in the environmental impact statement. And so, there is this piece on population, housing, socioeconomics, that's part of it. That's a section. As to how our consultants are going to take that on is something that's going to be fleshed out when we over the next couple months when we develop the scope.
So EIS is kind of a misnomer. I mean, when I think of an EIS, I'm thinking about impacts of the environment. I'm not thinking an environment, I suppose, can include housing, but because we are an agency that is tasked with protecting Lake Tahoe and the resources here in the basin. That's how I always envision an EIS, as, in other words, how will this project either, afford us some environmental gains? How can any negative impacts be properly mitigated? But we're kind of taking this to a whole nother level by expanding it to include socioeconomic factors.
I don't believe that we are. This is a section. These sections are in our IEC as well. These are sections that are when we do an environmental analysis, this is what we look at. So this isn't new for this project. It's just part of the several items that we look at when we do an environmental analysis, whether it's an IEC, which I have the privilege of doing many of those, of reviewing many of those a year, as do all of you, or an EA or an EIS, which we don't do as often.
No, I understand that, Jacob. We haven't criticized for using our checklist too often, as opposed to going into a more in-depth analysis with respect to environmental impacts as it relate to water quality, air quality, and so forth. So I'm just going to kind of echo Cindy's comment. We can't lose lose sight of our primary goal. And I understand the benefits in terms of reducing VMP if we can house people in the basin, but it's kind of one of those delicate balancing acts. So thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I just may build on Jacob's excellent response. Ms. Aldine is raising a question that we discussed with the Nevada Oversight Committee about mitigation fees. $15 million in mitigation fees collected on behalf of local jurisdictions over the last 5 years. We're going to do an analysis of fees and potentially a fee study, Jacob, if I'm not mistaken, right? We're going to combine more economic analysis on top of the items that you just discussed. So because we recognize all this has to work together in a system, if we start adjusting or tiering, we need to see what the impacts to EIP projects would be going forward, how that would affect the government, public works budgets of local government partners that use those mitigation fees for restoration projects. So appreciate flagging it as part of the scoping discussion here.
Well, and one thing that I'd like to bring up is something that I'd mentioned previously, and I have had conversations with people who've contacted me about the possibility of deferring some of these fees, but not forgiving them. Because we do have an obligation to collect these mitigation fees to enable our partners to do the good work they're doing on the ground.
If I can clarify, I hope, instead of extend the conversation needlessly, I think there are possibilities where the EIS or other analysis will identify there's a bigger impact with this type of project and that type of project. Maybe we've given them a flat fee and we could change the fee so this one pays more, this one pays less. And I think that, but then that, it's a zero-sum game. I think is the point. Maybe we can identify a large house that needs more coverage. Maybe they pay more of a coverage fee that we can use to put a stormwater system in where we have higher density or something. Those are the kinds of things we'll look to. Not the whole fiscal analysis, do I think will be in the EIS, but we will have to come back to you with proposal code changes and policies that do recognize those fiscal changes. So even if it's a little bit in a step beyond the EIS, but in developing the recommendation, we will need to be cognizant of that.
Thank you. Member Lane, and then I will go online. Go ahead.
Oh, the benefits of going last.
Except for our online members. You're like the buffer.
Right. Okay. All right. Somewhere towards the bottom. Great comments by all my colleagues. This topic is so big, it just makes my mind swirl when I start thinking about all the little pieces of it. The fees part kind of concerns me. So let me back up a second. When we talk about trying to build affordable housing, deed restricted affordable housing, or even workforce housing in El Dorado County, the problem always comes down to how can the government partner to try to drive those costs down? And if the government doesn't have a way of partnering, whether that be providing land or development rights or money, oftentimes the developer is going to go for the biggest bang they can get, right? And that's part of what our problem is. So we had a project that we just approved yesterday that's 768 single family homes, most of them deed restricted to the 55 and over age group, and only about 150 would be what they would consider normal development. But again, will it be affordable? And do we had nothing to bring to the table. So when we talk about fees on like larger homes, I'm wondering if there can be some kind of discussion at some level about those fees going into a pot of money to support affordable deed restricted housing. I mean, because it just going back to the jurisdiction and being used however they want. We love that freedom, but if we're trying to correlate large homes and the need for workforce housing, it's not always a disincentive to charge some of these mega homes huge fees. The money doesn't really seem to be the issue. But if at least that money is going towards supporting what we do want to see, I can see that nexus a little bit better. I do think that the short-term rentals is something that I was disappointed that it was left out of the discussion. Hotel and motel owners, traditional lodging, they've been arguing for 3 decades that it's not fair that they have to afford TAUs to build their properties, and they have to have annual inspections of their hot tubs. I mean, they have to have commercial grade kitchens, and they're competing against these huge 14,000 square foot mansions, some of which they have some of those constraints, but basically they don't. And so how do we kind of put them on a level playing field? And I do think I see both sides of the argument with regards to short-term rentals, but they do affect our ability for people that live here to be able to live here. So I'm sorry that they're not a part of the analysis in any way. And those are just my couple of comments.
And then let's go online, Ms. Hill, and then Ms. Loomer, I didn't see your hand up, but I'll certainly give you a chance if you wanted to make comments as well. Go ahead, Ms. Hill. And Alexis, if you need a minute, Alex, if I think your hand up, Ms. Loomer, your hand up is
good for the
now. So sorry, go ahead, Alexis.
Hi.
Go ahead. And again, Alexis, if you're having trouble connecting or hearing me, Alex, if you wanted to go ahead and then have Alexis go after you when she's reconnected.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. Yeah, again, really appreciate staff's work on this. And I really do appreciate all the comments of my fellow board members. I think it's so interesting how, we have the, I don't know, the pleasure or the challenge in TRPA of dealing with a lot of these themes that, the state of California, and I'm sure Nevada as well, are dealing with in so many other places. The affordability issue, the lack of housing, wanting to be sure we're preserving our environment. We see this on the coast of California a lot as well, where we want to, preserve the beautiful coast that we have, but we also want to provide affordable housing. So just appreciate that we're able to learn so much from the discussions we have here that really can scale up to so many other conversations we're having at the statewide level. I do want to just echo a couple of things that have been pointed out. I'm definitely mindful of how important it is that we increase the workforce housing and affordable housing in the basin. I do want to best use the footprints that we already have, though, so we're not having to go out, but rather, I think, go up and ensure that we're incentivizing folks to build into the existing footprints that we do have, where that's feasible. I know it's unfortunate we have so many second homes and rentals that can't be used for housing. I know that's an ongoing discussion at the local level, but I think it really is worth looking at out on in terms of existing housing units. But yeah, I want to just be mindful of the TMDLs and implications on stormwater runoff when we do expand the footprint outside of the kind of like core commercial areas. And I know the leak had flagged that earlier. I think those are my main things. Yeah, I think Cody, I believe, had mentioned wanting to ensure that if there was, additional units, they were deed restricted to not allow for vacation home rentals. I would add vacation home rentals or just non-primary residences. I think that would be really helpful. And I'll hand it over to Alexis in hopes that she can jump in.
Thank you. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say I'm excited to undertake the EIS. I think it will be good to understand the science behind the policy. And this is a tool that we need. We need additional tools to build housing so we can keep workers up in the basin so they can serve us and serve community members. And Washoe Tahoe is doing what we can to unlock units that are not currently online. And We are also looking at the old elementary school site as a potential partnership site with the Reno Housing Authority, which I hope to be discussing more with the board. So thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. All right, thank you all for that discussion. Any other further comments? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion.
I had one comment after Ms. Lane. So we are not going to at all analyze VMTs from the effects of the VHRs that are currently permitted. Will the EIS look at that, like the kind of what is the effect from what we currently have permitted as overnight rentals? And I guess I'll preface that with basically we've talked about this, but the ability for us to eventually potentially pick up a mitigation fee that could go to transit based on what these VHRs are adding into our VMT, load and us being able to mitigate that with more transit. I think we need transit money. And, I've talked about a $500 fee per 6,000 VHRs is $3 million a year. $1,000 fee is $6 million. So, yeah. So
I think I addressed this one night at your city council meeting. A VMT mitigation fee is at the time you do a new development. To get an ongoing fee, we don't have the authority to do that at TRPA. That would be a tax, which somebody else could propose to do, but that's not something we can do on an ongoing basis.
If it was if the VHR needed a use permit from the agency every year from TRPA, and that use permit were to show every year it was creating these VMTs, and we were collecting that fee annually to mitigate that one permit that's only an annual permit.
If every land use did that, we probably, if we had the enabling legislation to do that, again, that's a tax because it's an ongoing service. It's not a mitigation of an impact from development.
I see. So even if we make the change of the VHR applying to a residential unit of use, and we create like a VHR its own use, and we're showing that annually there's a need to mitigate that permit being issued.
Yeah, it's not so much the use that's the issue. It's what you're talking about is an ongoing service provision, the transportation system, or it's like if you're ongoing sewer bill, or that's not something TRPA is enabled to do under our compact. So that would be something that a utility or could be a gas tax. TTD has the authority to try to impose one of those with voting approval. But it would be an ongoing revenue source, is not a mitigation of an impact from a new development, which is our purview.
But I would believe, excuse me, Cindy Gustafson, Placer County. I do believe that the local jurisdiction can build it into their fee structure and which is what we've done to mitigate some of the impacts on VRBOs.
Yeah. Local jurisdictions have all.
So when you license them, you can have an annualized fee that then you justify for that and make the findings for that. I think the challenge we've seen is it's really hard to show that a VRBO contributes more VMT than a full-time resident. A full-time resident, because they're usually, ours are running at 50% occupancy. So, you'd have to make those findings and do that study.
And there's significant, John Hester again, sorry, I didn't identify myself last time, significantly different enabling legislation for local governments versus TRPA and between Nevada and California. Nevada has a whole detailed impact fee chapter that's different than what California has. So anyway.
And Cindy's comment brings the kind of what I was asking is, can we analyze that? What a local living there, if it's a full-time resident compared to that same unit being a VHR, can the EIS not bring us back the difference of VMT in that?
I don't know that we would, that's something we're proposing in the scope of this so that we should include it in this EIS, but I will tell you that the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, AMPO, which we belong to, Nick Haven's on their board, is actually convening a committee to look at ITE rates, International Institute of Traffic Engineer rates, which is what Cindy's talking about. Mm-hmm. And so that information we can bring back, but it wouldn't, I don't think, be part of this.
Right. And as I understand, again, Cindy Gustafson for the record, The ITE rates do look at hotel rooms. And so how do you quantify the number of rooms? Because obviously some of the VRBOs and Airbnbs are larger, so you attribute a multiplier to that. So I think that's exactly why the experts are trying to study it and come up with what is the appropriate value. And it's going to depend on size and distance from various
Director, oh, I'm sorry, Director Reagan, go ahead, and then Director
Thank you,
Settlemeyer.
Madam Chair. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. Maybe just to round out the discussion, we will have a lot of data from the environmental review, and we will be reviewing against all thresholds. One of our threshold categories is vehicle miles traveled, so that can benefit local jurisdictions, and nothing in what the policy at the regional level that we're doing will preclude local governments from doing some of these things that Mr. Hester and you were discussing. Just wanted to put it out there for the record.
Thank you. Director Settlemeyer?
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion. I look at this as kind of the meeting we had yesterday, Ms. Seda was on, where we were deliberately balancing what was before us. And at this juncture, I think we're in an interesting spot where I think we can be in agreement. If for some reason, though, people want to push things further one way or another, I'm very worried about where that will go.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Fink, Karen?
Thank you, Karen Fink, for the record. I just wanted to thank everybody for your comments here. And I think probably you can tell from this discussion that there's a wide range of ideas and how we should solve these problems. And I want to commend Jacob. I think he's put a lot of work, done a really thoughtful job at trying to balance all of these in the proposal. And listening to all the things that you've brought up, I do want to say that most of these, I believe, are in the proposal. Some of the things that you talked about, like allowing local jurisdictions to have more control over height and density for affordable by design projects. If they are doing something to unlock, we've called it unlock vacant housing in the proposal, but I think in the scoping process, we can look at, honing that to address what you've talked about. Conversation about making sure that we have sufficient funding for enforcement of deed restrictions and BMPs is in there. Also, there's this balance of ensuring that we are trying to do something to, not disincentivize large homes while making sure that we're showing that environmental nexus. That's all described in the proposal, as well as this concept of requiring new development to provide housing proportionate to the housing need. So that's another way that we have some tools in there for really trying to get at generating projects or funding to help local jurisdictions, support their local programs for like lease to locals, or some of the programs that Cindy talked about, or actually providing more affordable housing. And I did also want to comment, Ellie Waller brought up one thing about the need to change our code where if a project like Beach Club comes in and is required to replace affordable or moderate income housing, that should be new housing, not just deed restricting existing housing. And that is also in the proposal. So again, just thank you very much. And we're excited to move forward on this.
Thanks, Karen. Who wants to make the motion? Cody does.
Sure. I will put forward a motion to direct staff to proceed with an environmental impact statement for the cultivating community conserving the basin policy recommendation as outlined in attachment A to this packet.
Thank you. Tracy, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Loomer?
Yes.
Ms. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Settlemeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson?
Yes.
Ms. Faustinos? Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Ms. Aldine?
Yes.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Ms. Conrad Seda?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. I'm looking just at the rest, Director Reagan, reports, governing board reports, and public comment, so that we're not rushed and feeling hangry or fussy. Maybe we could break until 1.
Yes, let's
Great.
do that. It was time dependent. So if the board is interested in that, that's a great plan.
Great. Why don't we go on lunch break until 1 o'clock? Thanks, everyone. Board, it is 1 o'clock. I'm going to call us back to order, although please continue to enjoy lunch. I want to make sure I can also staff everybody had enough time. Your hands are free. We're cool to start. Awesome. Thank you. Close enough to free. All right. Let's resume then. We're now on agenda item 8, which is reports. Director Reagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I just have a couple of important announcements and remarks. So please continue enjoying your lunch. The first is to thank our admin team. Catherine Houston pointed out it takes 5 of us to do what one Maria does in a typical board meeting. Maria's on vacation, good for her. And while that's a little bit of an exaggeration, we miss Maria, but we really thank our admin team for stepping up. So thank you for keeping us running smoothly and for the great lunch. Yay. Appreciate all of that. Our facilities director, Jeremy, is always taking care of us, and Kayla Horowitz, my assistant. Okay, so it's 2026. The next slide I wanted to share was to ground us in the new year here in January, although we're almost into February. And to share a little fun fact to begin this presentation, I don't know if you are aware that we publish a TRPA pet calendar. And so you all have one at your dais. And if you don't need it, you're not obligated to take it, but it's actually pretty darn cute. And when I have a really hard day, I just look at this pet calendar at the end of the day and go, oh, and in April, I'm not biased or anything, but Captain Rainbow and Kelpie Reagan are pretty much in the running for best of show. So April has my 2 hounds in there, but there's a lot of beautiful pets. We are a pet friendly office. We've actually had staff that have told me, I got a higher paying job offer somewhere else, but I couldn't bring my dog to work with me. And so here I am, and I love Lake Tahoe. And we said, yay, that's part of our culture, is to be pet friendly office at TRPA. And so in grounding us of our work, great discussion today in the committees, in the main session. I think we've touched on all of these definite categories of strategic priorities. It's not everything that we do, because we still have our day-to-day permitting and all of our support work, but we can keep our eye on the big 4. And I think it's helpful for us to ground the work that we're doing in advancing the thresholds in these 4 large strategic priorities, which you set for us last April at the retreat. And it's the lake and watersheds, our forest and forest health and wildfire, transportation, how we get around, and Tahoe living and housing. And so much of what we do crosses those different categories. That's the whole idea of a system that works together. It's like a human body. You have your brain, you have your circulatory system, your heart, your lungs, like it all has to work together. And so harmonizing these different values can be very challenging, but that's the charge of the compact. And just wanted to ground us in this new year. And also to call attention to one thing that you voted on today that maybe doesn't show up in the 4 clean priorities, but things like National Radon Awareness Month. Like that is a resolution that we're very pleased for you to look at every year in your packet. We don't talk about it much in the main body of the board meeting, but if you didn't get a chance to go through in detail that resolution, radon is active. We're sitting on granite here in the Sierra. We have exceedingly high levels in the Sierra, in Lake Tahoe, more so than other places. And radon kills like more than 20,000 people a year. And so just raising awareness about that, in addition to all the other things, I just wanted to use that example, is that there's a lot of important things out there. And hopefully our community will take more to heart related to issues that matter for the health of our local citizens. Okay, so we'll just give a couple highlights next on legislative activities. Really big momentum coming off last year, and some accomplishments that we had in the Nevada session, the California session. A couple highlights for the state of Nevada. I really want to thank board member Shelley Aldine, who was with us last Friday. We spent the entire afternoon in Carson City in the legislature 1 to 6 p.m., the first of 6 meetings, and appreciated Shelley's support. We have a new chair. We have a couple of new members. There's 8 members of the legislature on our interim committee. Of course, that meets in the off years. So legislature met last year, 25, and the interim will be going on until August of this year, 2026. The next meeting is February 27th. That'll be right here at TRPA. And I've thought that Ellie Waller made a great suggestion. I will be sure to get the dates for the next 5 meetings to you so that you can look at them on your calendars, but particularly we always have appreciated our board members for coming, even just to sit or to present, make public comment, and particularly our Nevada members have been very helpful in the past. So
And
I'll get those.
Director, again, I'm sorry to interrupt
Yes,
you.
please.
Just a point of clarification there
Yes.
too. The legislature usually in Nevada archives those videos or allows participation remotely. So I just didn't know if the
Yes.
interim committees allowed that as well. If folks aren't able to attend, thank you, Director Settlemeyer. They can still view it and or participate remotely and even watch it after the fact if need be.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks. Thank you so much for raising that. So what I will do is send you the link to the last one so that you can take a look because there was a lot of public comment. I think it was an hour at the beginning of the meeting and probably 45 minutes at the end. And so I'd love to send you the link for you to take a look at. And then you can either watch remotely, you can call in or submit written comments as well. And so Shelley, was there anything you'd like to add to that since you were kind enough to spend the afternoon with us last Friday?
No, I mean, other than to say, Julie, I think you handled yourself beautifully. We occasionally we get compliments, but more often than not, we get criticisms. And, you acknowledge the importance of public comment and this ongoing dialogue that we have with people who are interested in the welfare of the basin, but may have opinions that are not in keeping with our own. And so I want to applaud you, for sticking to the facts, so to speak, and doing a good job of reporting out on our progress.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shelley. I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. And a big thanks to my team. I think we had the majority of our executive team that also joined for that meeting and many staff members that worked to prepare their you can get in any legislative body, same thing happens in California and in Congress, anything from a really technical question about a threshold standard all the way to what's the current lake level today and how is the lake formed? It goes the gamut. So I think Devin Middlebrook had a stack that was this big of, possible questions that we had researched to make sure we had the up-to-date information. And so it takes a village. Thank you for your comments, Shelley. Okay, so we'll get that out to the board. And then moving into California, we also had Governor Newsom's budget announced. And the good news there for TRPA's perspective is that we are whole. The state of California is looking at a deficit. And so there will be hard conversations in the coming months until we get to the May revision, which we all call the May revise for California, when the most updated budget numbers are considered. And that affects the state of California. It affects so many aspects of our day-to-day, and including our general fund. So we'll keep plugging away on that. And then also a point of news, our Assembly member, Heather Hadwick, has made good on her promise to introduce legislation to support and mirror Nevada's no wake zone, the 600-foot no wake zone that we went through the Nevada legislative session last in 2025. And also potentially to add in some safety corridor language consistent with the Nevada corridor public recreation and safety zones in some kind of safety bill. And so we have legislative council looking at language in California with the support of Assembly member Heather Hadwick. So really good news. We'd like to mirror some of those legislative wins that we had in Nevada into California. And then of course, we're going to keep pushing on the formula funding for transit, which would allow California to match the federal formula for population, freeing up additional support for transit operations. So we're going to keep working on that as well. And then on the federal side, really big news yesterday. I think you all got the email with a press release, but our congressional delegation is on board has introduced an amendment to modernize what's called the Santini-Burton Act. And at the fire chiefs meeting yesterday, there's a lot of transition in leadership in the basin and several new chiefs. And I reminded the group, like, these were actual individuals. You know, Santini was a member of Congress in Nevada and Burton was a member of Congress in California. And the two of them had this act in 1980, which was the precursor to Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act, where lands are sold in Southern Nevada to benefit the environment of the state of Nevada, including a big set aside for Tahoe. So just a quick primer on Santini Burton. I do want to thank many of you for engaging on this, particularly Director Settlemeyer and our representatives of Nevada, who are keeping all Nevada officials, including the governor's office, informed, because it will be very crucial for us to be successful to have everyone in lockstep on this. But there are funds that are sitting in an account the BLM administers that the Forest Service historically made some very critical acquisitions for environmental protection and to remove development potential. And they initially were supposed to use those funds also for maintenance of public lands. A technical amendment about 20 years ago restricted the Forest Service's ability to tap those funds for maintenance. So of things like urban lots in neighborhoods that need additional fuels treatments. So this amendment would modernize that and fix some of those mistakes, allow the Forest Service more access to these funds, and allow more investment in public lands, natural resource protections related to our recreation sites. And so I think that also would give some predictable funding to address a lot of the concerns we hear from the community about access to public lands, you know, too many people at the same trailhead at the same time, lack of litter management, restroom facilities, things that we rely on to protect natural resources while ensuring public access. So a special thank you to all the partners in the basin that TRPA has worked with and helped convene for this important work. We've been working for actually 3 years in the basin to do the work with the federal agencies, with all the 2 states, with the local governments, with the private sector, nonprofit community, the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California, to be in agreement about how to move forward on this and to have our delegation, bi-state, bipartisan delegation, introduce this as something we've actually been working toward for years. So, and importantly, the amendment would recognize the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California, who were not even mentioned in the original act. And so the tribe is looking at it as a great opportunity to help them be more active in the restoration work at Tahoe. So big news there on the federal front. And then appropriations are looking really good if we don't go into another shutdown of the government, but the so-called minibus appropriations bills are looking very positive for Tahoe. More than $20 million in Lake Tahoe Restoration Act funding that would go to EIP projects. But on top of that, for the first time, $6 million appropriated potentially for an Alpine Lake pilot program, which we got authorized in the Water Resources Development Act many, many years ago. The first time we actually would get money appropriated, not just authorized. And that would go to beef up our invasive species funding for, you know, preventing the golden mussel, all the other threats that we're seeing for invasive species. And there are other community directed spending, potential, you know, millions for the TTD Sand Harbor Multi-Use Trail Project on the Nevada side on Highway 28, City of South Lake Tahoe project, water infrastructure projects to benefit fire suppression. So a lot going on in the federal space. And then just 2 other quick slides before I turn this over to our general counsel. One thing wanted to flag, you've heard from me in previous engagements and briefings that we are changing our agendas. And while just preparing for this meeting, I went back and Googled TRPA board agenda packet from 1970s. And an agenda will pop up in our archives from 1979. And it looks exactly the same as the agenda that you have today. And no one can make sense of it. So, I mean, this is something like 50 years in the making, but I'm so proud of our staff who have engaged with the public. We have sent emails to public commenters the last quarter of last year. Anyone that made a public comment over the last 3 months, we emailed them the new format. They're giving us suggestions, and we're rolling this out in February. And please give us your thoughts and suggestions as well. We may not get it 100% right on the first try, but so far, everyone that's reviewed it has said, it's so much easier to navigate. This is going to be a big improvement. And we are keeping the public comment structure the same. Now, we've heard some members of the public are not pleased with the change. Others really are, because it's providing more certainty that they have the ability to make public comment at the beginning of the meeting versus not being sure at what time, that time of day, that the action item might come forward. So we'll continue to keep working through it, but our commitment is to be easier for the public to navigate. So really proud of the staff who've worked on that. And then before we go to what's coming up, just one more photo. If we go to the next slide, some of you may have caught some media clips from Operation Sierra Storm. We have meteorologists from the country and the world that come to Tahoe every January to talk about meteorology, atmospheric science, what's going on with snow or lack of snow. But this year was really neat because some of you might follow Open Snow, which is very popular. Pretty good forecasts. And I had the pleasure of introducing the Open Snow discussion at the Lake Tahoe Community College in the theater. And that's me on the right, introducing Brian Allegretto, who is very well known for his forecast and just the story of how he got to have Open Snow, how it's evolving, how they're using AI to better refine their models and their forecasts, and how that affects pretty much everything that we do in Tahoe. I often say, having grown up on a farm, like, we're farmers in Tahoe. Our whole town runs on the weather. Is it snowing? Is it not snowing? Is it too much snow? Is it not enough snow? Is it drought? Is it fire? So much going on. And that was a real pleasure that we got to participate in that. And then coming up, we have on the horizon, if we go to the what's coming up slide, we briefed the forest health and water quality threshold updates, and thank you for the recommendations to move forward to the full board for action in February. We have our annual report coming out, and we have a pretty meaty discussion around funding at the transportation committee of the board that will flow into a full board action item in March for VMT policy. So the next couple of months are very heavy, weighty topics. Also, following March, we have a briefing at Regional Planning Committee on the Tahoe Keys Marina Redevelopment Project that you saw in a board tour on one of your retreats. We have the TED, the Tahoe El Dorado County Area Plan, being briefed at Regional Planning Committee. We have some appeals coming, and then mark your calendars for May. I believe Maria has already sent you calendar invites, but we'll have our board retreat at the May meeting, not April this year. So that'll be a regular Wednesday meeting in May, and then Thursday, the day after, will be the board retreat, the strategic planning session. And then with that, I believe I am wrapping up, and we'll move that back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. And just quickly, when I first moved to Tahoe, I read Brian Allegretto's report so many times and so often that my husband was like, "Who's this Brian you're always quoting?" I'm like, no, it's Open Snow and it's all the weather all the time. All right, Graham, updates?
I do have a couple updates today, hopefully pretty timely updates given the cultivating community item that we're talking about today. These are litigation updates, a couple of cases that we weren't directly involved with, but are certainly close to home. Cindy's very familiar with one, a Placer County case. Friends of the West Shore versus Placer County. This was a Placer County decision. Actually, both of these cases involved Doug Flaherty's group. Both were challenges to the Placer County and Washoe counties updates to their area plan, and both, Doug Flaherty and some others challenged both of those, one in Placer County and then Washoe counties. So for the Placer County, it was more of a traditional CEQA case, and this was some housing updates that Placer County initiated themselves. So it wasn't our phase 2 updates, but they were also kind of key to addressing affordable housing. They were pretty minor updates, I think, but the petitioners made some CEQA arguments that there was new information that required more supplemental environmental impact studies, and the court rejected those arguments and said that things like wildfire risks, this isn't new information in California. And so when Placer County did an EIS in 2016 when they adopted their area plan. The several years, between 2016 and when they proposed adopted these new smaller updates in 2023, I believe. The wildfire risks isn't new information. There was an Attorney General's guidance document that didn't constitute new information. And then the petitioners also cited new AI modeling technology, and we hear that in some of our comments. And the court said, no, that's not new information, and it doesn't require Placer County to go back and do a supplemental EIS. So it's a CEQA case. It's not exactly a TRPA. It's a lower court in Placer County. But it does give us, some pushback or some sort of understanding of these arguments about what requires more in-depth analysis. I would also say that all of these environmental review cases are really tied to the action involved. And here in Placer County, like I said, these were pretty minor updates. Like I think something like we'll start measuring the height in feet rather than stories. These are pretty small changes, but still relevant and helpful to understand. Then yesterday or 2 days ago, I'm sorry, Washoe County, it was the Nevada Second Judicial District, which is the state court in Nevada, rejected Mr. Flaherty's lawsuit against Washoe County's adoption of the Phase 2 amendments. That case was a little bit different. It was procedural and found that Mr. Flaherty organization didn't exhaust administrative remedies. So right now, there's the possibility of appeal on that one, but these were two updates that are positive developments, at least for what we're doing.
Thanks, Graham. Any board members have any questions or comments on either Julie or Graham's reports?
I just have a question.
Sure.
Julie, the renewal of the Santini Burton. If you live in Nevada, it's Santini Burton. If you live in California, it's Burton Santini. So is it going to include money for additional lot acquisitions?
Thank you for the question. This is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. Yes. So importantly, I should clarify, there would be no change to that account in terms of its ability to acquire new properties. There aren't that many left, but there may be some. Let's say Meeks Lumber in the city of South Lake Tahoe decides that they are finally ready to sell to a public entity. The funds would still be able to be accessed for acquisitions for environmental purposes. It would just expand the ability to use those funds for maintenance and for more natural resource protections on public lands. It is $500 million. And the other part of that discussion is that, with Southern Nevada monies have been wanted to stay in the U.S. Treasury since the beginning of time of the Southern Nevada program. So there's always a desire to sweep any monies in those accounts to Washington versus having them stay and deliver on their legislative intent, which was to stay in Tahoe. So we feel like it's very important to amend the act so that that money stays with Tahoe, which was the intent of the act.
All right, moving on then to agenda item 9, which is governing board member reports. Any governing board members have anything to report? Ms. Lean?
No, you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Lean, then Ms. Gustafson.
Well, I just wanted to bring back to the board's attention the second summer coming up of the Emerald Bay Shuttle, and thank the board again and the regional grant program for supporting transit in that. We think we need about $1 million to run that program, and TRPA granted us $540,000 over a 2-year period. So $270,000 per year. So just for the transit, we need somewhere around $500,000. And what I'm really excited to share with all of you today is El Dorado County Air Quality Management Division has come up with $393,000 per year for the next few years for that transit operation. And so the transit part of that is fully funded for at least the next 2 years. And, you know, we'll work on the rest, but that was a big chunk that really pushed us over the top, combined with TRPA coming out of the gate first. I think that gave us a lot of legitimacy in El Dorado County's eyes. So, yeah.
Sure, thank you. Cindy Gustafson, Placer County. I already did. Good challenge there, Ms. Lane. A couple items. Our board will be in town next Tuesday, and we are considering some additional changes in our STR ordinance. This has been an adaptive process since 2019 when we first did our ordinance. And we've convened a group of community members coming forward with recommendations, and then the board will give direction on Tuesday. One of the items, as you may or may not remember, that we agreed that as new hotel tourist accommodation units were built in our region, again, trying to find an incentive and community support, we would reduce the numbers in our cap in STR permits. And so looking at how we do a comparison, because obviously STRs are many different sizes. Hotel rooms are generally within a 1 to 2 bedroom, studio to 2 bedroom size. So looking at a tiered approach on that, but nonetheless, moving that forward to our board for consideration. Another committee, another $4 million to housing efforts in our region in North Shore. And then a report on our parking management from last summer, and probably a consideration of raising the penalties. Right now, I believe we did a little over 500 citations in Kings Beach. This was a pilot program in Kings Beach only. We heavily subsidized the program to the tune of well over $100,000 from what we collected to what the costs of administering the program were. But it was a pilot, and we understood that. But we're looking at raising the penalties for parking, the cost of parking, and then potentially the penalties for parking violations. We would love to expand it to the Tahoe City community as well, but we'll have to see how the business owners feel. Right now, they've not been supportive of it until we work out more of the issues, because we have a real shortage of parking in either of our town centers. And then finally, coming up in February and through the spring, 39 North, which is the former redevelopment properties in Kings Beach for a hotel development in Kings Beach. That project will be coming back to the community through the Municipal Advisory Committee, and then to the Planning Commission in March or so, I believe, and then to the Board of Supervisors. So I think for the public, that's a very critical project. Depending on your viewpoint, you either love it or hate it. And there's a lot of people on both sides of that one. But we do look forward to hearing from the community with the revised project that meets the standards of the community plan. So look forward to that one too. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys. Were there any other governing member reports? No. Okay.
Right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Shelley.
I have an announcement to make.
Yes.
Brooke is running for reelection.
All right. Last term.
Thank you for your public service. She's counting.
Congrats. Thank you.
If she takes a break, she can come back and run
So
again.
you have 3 terms, right? Brooke, it's 3 terms?
No, we do two
You just
terms.
2. Okay.
Any agenda item 10, any committee reports? Yeah.
That the EIP committee met today. It had been a long time coming. We approved the recommendations that Julie talked about already in updates to both the water quality and forest health thresholds. And then we had a great presentation on the EIP public engagement program. And there is a new logo, which I'm sure we'll be sharing shortly with the rest of the board. And look out for an update also on a new and improved website for the EIP program, which is going to have some great, links to get project information pretty readily, and it's exciting. So that's it.
Thank you. Any other committee reports? Nope. All right, then we are on to our final agenda item. This is the general interest public comment period. Any member of the public wishing to address the governing board and any item listed or not listed on the agenda, including the consent items, may do so at this time. Just a reminder that the governing board can only deliberate or act on items listed on the posted agenda and are not permitted to comment on agenda items at this time. We will hear comments for 3 minutes per speaker, and I don't actually see anyone in the room wishing to make comments, so we will go straight to online. Oh, are there comments in the room? Come on up. Nope. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 2 hands raised online. The first is our phone-in caller. Phone number ends in 8525. If you unmute yourself, you can make your comment.
Hi, this is Leo Bennett Koshan again. Thank you. It was a great meeting to listen to. I used the phone because I also cleaned my house at the same time, and you guys really provided a great motivation. I have 3 comments basically, and the first one has to go with your, the hearing about workforce housing. Great report and everything, and balancing it with the environment and the transportation issues. But I just really hope that you keep your eye on all these pieces, because these things fall apart: workplace housing, transportation, environment, for systemic reasons, as you all know. And it's really hard as an elected body to go up against the interests of developers and all their money. God bless them, but that's what motivates them, and you're there to balance it. So good luck. My second one has to do with your public comment policy that you adopted in April of 23. I'm a member of the First Amendment Coalition, has been trained extensively in the Brown Act, which is, California's measurement. And I would ask that you take a look at it, perhaps bring it back. I've not been able to track where the board actually adopted it, to try to understand the reasons. But from my understanding, you're really close, if not over, in terms of the Brown Act. And then as a retired teacher, I just think that in terms of engagement with the public and the way conversations evolve, this is not the best way. If you want to do efficiency, you have options in terms of telling public to go to committees, or hey, you can expand it and let people talk twice, first at the beginning and then during an action item. Pick their choice. And then lastly, I just thought you guys did such a great job. I've been in this for 60 years, active, involved, mentored by my mother. And in terms of a good governance team, harmonizing the public, balancing, respect, wow, great job. You are allowed under the Brown Act, so I don't know about your stuff, and it does say on your agenda, you can respond to the public. You just can't have a discussion. So I'm just asking, where can we find your pet calendar? Because I looked it up and it only has an image of this great dog with your written report, but I couldn't find the calendar. Thank you for taking my comments.
I'll bring you one, Leo.
The last hand raised is the name on Zoom is Q. Q, if you could again state your full name for the record and unmute to make your comment.
TRPA Director Julie Reagan is not only a grifter and a con artist, but is a despicable, corrupt, pathological liar. She is a mirror reflection of the TRPA Board of Directors who had the effrontery to hire her in the first place. Under her helm, TRPA is currently implementing a new authoritarian practice of outright violating constitutionally protected due process and First Amendment rights. TRPA is knowingly and purposefully suppressing and obstructing both timely hard-mailed and emailed public comment from being entered into the meeting record and being disseminated to all board members. The case law is crystal clear that such constitutional violations alone are incontrovertibly grounds for judicial review to outright invalidate governing board decisions on any agenda item pertinent to censored public comments. For example, I can produce incontrovertible video proof from a trusted source that TRPA confirmed it had received via public comment of thousands of pages of peer-reviewed research before yesterday's Tuesday 4 p.m. courtesy deadline, many of which are published by prominent professors at preeminent institutions in prestigious journals, and all of this was suppressed in order to unlawfully affect the outcome of today's hearings. This large body of research directly controverts tenuous science claims underpinning political-driven policy being considered by the governing board today. TRPA board members have knowingly approved unconstitutional rules of procedure that strategically deprive the public of their inviolable due process right for a right to be heard pertaining to each and every agenda item at a meaningful time. The contours of constitutional due process of law are well settled under 250 years of precedent. TRPA has corruptly lumped public comment for all agenda items together into a 3-minute window at the beginning of the meeting before any testimony is made on any the agenda item whatsoever. Hearing materials, including presentation slides, are introduced right before meetings, and public is entirely unable to discover arguments and alleged factual bases presented for the first time during the hearing held after public comment. Moreover, when an individual has a liberty interest in 3 or more agenda items, their comment time is divided between all of these items unfairly and unreasonably, leaving them with less than a minute for each item. This is an egregious violation of constitutional law. Not only should each and every one of you be civilly liable for your constitutional violations, but your corrupt asses should be voted out of office. You are all morally bankrupt. Every last one of you. You don't care about anything other than power and money. That's why you wanted office, and that's the true reason you're here today. The public at this point needs to realize that this entire board meeting is a charade. The agency itself is little more than a thinly veiled banana republic. It acts as though it reigns over a very small sovereign territory that is politically unstable and whose economy is dominated by very large foreign or external companies and depends on one exploitive industry.
All right, and we're at 3 minutes.
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment.
Thank you. I am now looking for a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thanks, guys. We're adjourned.